Rangers keep disappearing from this lookout tower. I don't really talk about this shift much, mostly because when I do, people laugh. Or worse, they nod politely like I'm losing it. It was the summer of 2022. I had just transferred out to Bitterroot Ridge, a dense patch of forest tucked deep in northern Montana, near the edge of Flathead National Forest. It's not one of the big-name parks. No touristy trails, no guided hikes, no glossy visitor centers. Just tall pines, long silences, and a lookout tower so damn remote you had to hike 6 miles just to get a cell signal. The tower was called Station 59, and it hadn't had a full-time ranger in over 3 years. I didn't find out why until later. It was my 3rd day on post. I'd settled into a rhythm. Wake up early, check weather logs, scan the horizon with binoculars, report back to dispatch on anything out of place. The usual ranger stuff. My only company was a half-broke radio and a rusted thermos the last guy left behind. I remember thinking, damn, this guy just ghosted, didn't even take his coffee mug. At first, it was peaceful, quiet in the way only the woods can be. That kind of thick silence where every bird call or creaking branch feels 10 times louder. But around the 5th day, things started feeling off. I can't explain it well. There wasn't some massive event that tipped me off. No bear clawing at the ladder or a stranger showing up at midnight. It was smaller than that. Weirder. Like the stairs. The lookout tower had 73 steps from the ground to the platform. I counted them every time I went up or down. One of those little compulsions to kill the boredom. But on that evening, I swear on my life there were 74. I counted again. 74. Thought maybe I was just tired. Wrote it off. But the next morning, they were back to 73. Stuff like that kept happening. My boots would be moved when I hadn't touched them. The lantern on the west wall would flicker even though it was battery-powered. Harmless things, enough to make you question your own damn head, but nothing serious. Until I met the guy in the green hoodie. It was about 9 p.m. I was logging the last weather report, a boring mix of light wind and dropping temps. I was just about to turn in when I spotted someone at the base of the tower. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing there, head tilted up like he was waiting for me to invite him up. He was wearing a green hoodie, jeans, and muddy boots. Nothing unusual, except for the fact that no one was supposed to be out here. No campgrounds, no day hikes, nothing for miles. The whole zone was restricted after fire season. I called out, "Hey, you lost." He didn't answer. I leaned over the railing. "You all right, man? You need help?" Still nothing. His face was in shadow, and I remember thinking maybe he was hurt, maybe in shock or something. So I grabbed my flashlight and started down the ladder. By the time I reached the bottom, he was gone. No footsteps, no rustling, no trail disturbed. Just gone. I swept the flashlight in every direction, calling out, trying not to let the anxiety creep into my voice. "Hello? You can't be out here. This area is closed." Nothing. When I climbed back up, my boots were gone. They weren't stolen. They were placed. One in the middle of the walkway, the other tucked behind the generator box like someone had watched me leave and moved them while I was on the ground. I slept with my knife that night. Didn't report it. Who the hell would believe me? That was the start of it. Every night after that, something strange would happen. Lights flickering, knocking at the base of the tower, shadows moving where nothing should have moved. The green hoodie guy, I saw him again. Twice, always at a distance, never speaking. Sometimes at the edge of the clearing. Once perched in a tree, just watching. I kept notes. Dates, times, everything. Started sounding like a damn lunatic, but I needed to prove to myself I wasn't cracking up. And then came the day I opened the drawer under the cot and found a journal. It belonged to the last ranger, a guy named Cody Ramirez, the one who never officially quit. Most of the entries were standard shift logs, weather, trail maintenance, wild animal sightings. But the last dozen pages, they read like mine. Boots moved, steps changing, lights flickering, guy in the hoodie. His last entry chilled me. I can quote it because I've never forgotten it. "He's not a person." I don't think he ever was. I thought the tower would keep me safe, but it's like he's learning how to get in. Last night, he was halfway up the ladder. That was the last anyone heard from Cody. No resignation, no body, just gone. Same way the ranger before him vanished. And now it was my turn. I tried to leave the next morning. I packed up before sunrise, stuffed what little gear I had into my bag, grabbed the emergency flare gun, left the damn coffee thermos behind. I didn't even call dispatch. Didn't care if it meant breaking protocol. I just knew I had to get the hell out. There's a trail not on most maps, but every ranger knows it. It's narrow, winding through old pine and deadfall, but it gets you to the ranger station after about 5 hours of hard hiking. I'd walked it once during training. This time felt different. Off. Like the forest didn't want me to go. I know how that sounds. Paranoid. Dramatic. But there were no birds that morning. No crickets. Just my boots crunching under frost-hardened needles and the wind weaving through the trees like it was trying to say something. 2 miles in, I saw it again. A hoodie, green like before, caught on a branch ahead of me. The same style. Same tears at the shoulder. Only now it was empty, just hanging there like bait. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. The whole forest suddenly felt closer, heavier, like it was leaning in. I didn't touch the hoodie. I walked past it fast, head down, gripping the flare gun like it was a lifeline. I kept telling myself, just keep walking. You're imagining it. You've been alone too long. That's when the smell hit. It was faint at first, sour, like rotting meat and rust. I know the scent of decomposing animals. I've come across dead elk, coyotes, hell, even a bear once. But this wasn't just death. It was old, wet, like something had been buried and then dragged back up. That's when I saw the tree. It was stripped bare, not fallen, still standing, but all the bark had been clawed off down to the pale flesh of the wood. At its base, something was smeared on the roots, dark, sticky. Blood, or something close. I should have turned around, should have called for help right then. But I kept walking, not because I was brave, but because I was scared of what might be behind me if I stopped. About an hour later, the trail just ended. I swear to God, I know that trail. I walked it just last week. But now it cut off into thick undergrowth like it had never been there at all. No markers, no blazes, just endless, identical trees. I doubled back, thinking maybe I'd gone off track. That's when I saw the footprints. My own, the same pattern, same tread, circling back toward where I'd started. Only I hadn't turned around. That was the moment I realized I wasn't going to make it out that day. I started yelling, screaming for anyone. I fired the flare once. It shot up between the trees and vanished into the canopy. No one saw it. No one was going to see it. I turned and ran, sprinting toward nowhere. My heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to break through my ribs. At some point I tripped, cracked my knee against a stump, tore my sleeve on a branch. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Eventually the trees opened up again. I stumbled into a clearing and froze. I was back at the base of the tower. Station 59. No way. No way. I hadn't turned around. I'd walked in a straight line for hours. But there it was, clear as day. The same rusted ladder, the same busted solar panel leaning off the edge. My bag, which I'd left at the base in my rush to leave, was sitting there, right where I dropped it. And then I saw something new on the side of the tower. Someone had carved something into the wood. Deep scratches, fresh, stayed in the light. I didn't remember seeing them before. Not once in the week I'd been there. Not even the night before. And right then, as if cued by those words, the sun dipped behind the ridge and the shadows rolled back in. I climbed back up to the tower, limping, blood dripping down my shin, heart still beating like a drum. I locked the hatch behind me, sat in the farthest corner, rocking like a goddamn lunatic. Didn't sleep. Barely breathed. Sometime after midnight, I heard the ladder creak. One rung, then another, slow, deliberate. I held my knife so tight my hand cramped. I didn't go to the window. Didn't shine a light, just waited. And then, knocking. 3 slow, hollow knocks. Then nothing. I stayed awake until the sun rose. When I finally worked up the courage to look outside, there was no one there. But the hoodie was folded neatly, sitting in the center of the walkway. I didn't touch the hoodie. I stood there staring at it for a long time, watching it like it might twitch or move if I blinked too long. It wasn't just that it was folded perfectly, or that it hadn't been there when I passed out from exhaustion just before sunrise. It was dry. No dew. No dust. Like someone had just placed it there minutes before I woke. I used my boot to push it off the edge of the walkway, watched it flutter down into the brush below and disappear into the undergrowth like it had been waiting for that. I should have left it at that. But about an hour later, I looked over the railing and it was gone. Not on the ground, not caught on a bush or stuck on a root, just gone. The tower started to feel smaller after that. I walked the platform over and over again, checking the railings, the hatch, the corners, as if I'd missed something. But the truth was, I wasn't looking for a person. I was looking for proof I wasn't going insane. At noon, dispatch finally buzzed me. Ranger Hill, this is Station Command. You haven't checked in. Everything all right up there? My throat locked. I hovered over the mic for a full minute before replying. Yeah, I finally muttered. Everything's fine. Because how do you explain something like this? Hey, I tried to leave, but the woods circled me back to the tower, and now I'm being stalked by a guy in a hoodie who never talks and might not even be human. Doesn't exactly fly over the radio. Besides, I needed answers, not a wellness check. So I made a decision, probably the dumbest I've ever made. And trust me, I've made a few. I decided to climb down that night, but not to leave. Not this time. I was going to look for him. There was this part of the woods I'd always avoided, a gully about half a mile from the tower where the trees grow tight and black moss hangs off the limbs like wet rags. Cody had mentioned it once in his journal, called it the throat. He wrote, he watches from the throat. That's where he waits. So I waited until just after dusk, grabbed my flashlight knife and the bear mace I always kept under the cot. I left the radio on in case I had to call for backup. Halfway down the ladder, I paused. There were scratches on the rungs. I know they weren't there before. 3 long grooves on each rail, deep enough to split the metal in places. Like claws, or a knife dragged slowly up the ladder. I didn't want to think about what that meant. The forest at night is a different world. Trees groan. Wind doesn't whisper. It screams between trunks. Shadows move like they have purpose. But I kept walking, flashlight low, steps slow and careful. Eventually, I found it. The gully. The ground dipped suddenly, like the earth had been scooped out by something massive. Trees leaned inward over it, roots exposed like they were trying to crawl away. The air smelled wrong down there, sweet and rotting, wet earth and old iron. I scanned the area with my flashlight. Then I saw it. Not him. Something else. Tied to a tree with thick cable was a trail cam. One of ours. Except it had been smashed. The lens cracked. The SD card slot twisted open. Someone, or something, didn't want it recording. I stepped closer and saw a boot print next to it. Not mine. Too big. Too flat. Then my light flicked over something nearby. Fabric. The hoodie. Lying in a heap next to a tree. Not folded. Torn. And next to it, a notebook. I recognized it immediately. Green canvas cover. National Park Service standard issue. It was Cody's. I opened it and flipped to the last page. His handwriting was shaking, sloppy, stained with something dark. He wears your face. Don't trust the voice. Don't follow the trail. The tower is not safe anymore. Stay in the light. That's when I heard it. My voice. Not close. Just off in the trees. Muffled, like someone calling through cloth. Hey, you out here? You okay? It was me. My exact voice. Same cadence, same rhythm. I froze. It repeated, louder this time. Hey, I said, are you okay? Branches cracked behind me. Then silence. I turned, holding the flashlight like a weapon, aiming it at every corner of the gully. My breath fogged the air in front of me. Everything was still. Too still. And then something darted between the trees. I didn't get a good look. Just a blur of movement. But it was fast. Wrong, like it didn't have joints or too many of them. The voice came again, right beside me this time. Don't worry, man. I'm right here. I ran. I don't remember how long or how far. I only stopped when I could see the tower lights through the trees again, flickering like a damn beacon. I slammed the hatch behind me and sat against the door for hours, clutching Cody's notebook like a Bible. Whatever it was out there, it knew how to mimic. It knew my name, my voice, my habits. It knew how to break people slowly. The next morning, there was a new carving on the platform railing. The light won't save you. Next time. I didn't leave the tower that day. Didn't even step out onto the walkway. I kept the hatch bolted and sat with my back against the wall, eyes fixed on the horizon. Even when the sun rose and lit the forest in gold, it didn't make me feel better. Didn't warm the inside of this box I was trapped in. It was the feeling that got to me, like I wasn't alone in that tower. And not in the metaphorical sense. I kept hearing things, faint movements from the corner behind the water tank, breathing that wasn't mine when I was lying on the cot pretending to sleep. You ever hear someone inhale softly from across a room like they're trying not to be heard? That's what it sounded like. At one point, I threw open the supply cabinet and aimed my flashlight inside like it was a weapon. Nothing. But I still slammed it shut and stacked 3 boxes in front of it like that would help. Around noon, the radio crackled again. But this time, it wasn't dispatch. It was me. "This is Ranger Hill, Station 59. You copy? Everything's quiet up here. Weather's clear. No fires. Just another peaceful day on the ridge." My own voice, word for word. The check-in I'd done 2 days ago. Only no one was holding down the mic. It just played on loop, broken, like the signal had been ripped from my throat and spit back out by something that didn't know how to use it right. I yanked the radio plug and flung it across the room. No more comms, no more contact, just me, the tower, and whatever was out there. I tried to focus, pored over Cody's journal again, looking for any clue, any mention of what this thing was, but it never said. Just described symptoms, patterns, isolation, mimicry, movement in the corners of vision. Then came the dreams. He talked about vivid, vile dreams, the kind you wake up from sweating through your mattress. And that night, I found out what he meant. It started with the tower shaking. Just a little, barely noticeable, like wind, except there was no wind. Then came the sound, boots on the ladder, slow, one rung at a time, and a voice, mine again. "You awake? Hey, you okay, man? Let me in." I held my breath, clutched the flare gun, and crept toward the hatch. It was still bolted, but the voice kept coming, soft, calm, familiar. "Don't freak out, it's just me. I forgot my bag down there." That's when I remembered. I never told anyone I left my bag at the bottom. No one should know that. I didn't say a word, just backed away, sat in the corner, didn't sleep. When dawn finally broke, I opened the hatch and looked down. No one there, of course. But etched into the metal of the top rung, carved in deep splintered letters, was a question. Who are you when no one's looking? That's when I realized the thing wasn't just mimicking, it was trying to replace me. And worse, it was learning. Around midday, I found a photo jammed between 2 floorboards under the cot. It wasn't old. It had been taken recently, days ago, maybe hours. It was me, standing in the tower, looking out over the railing. But I hadn't posed for it, hadn't even known it was taken. My back was to the camera. But even in that grainy, color-drained shot, I could see it. My reflection in the glass of the lookout window. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. It looked similar, like someone had studied me and tried to draw me from memory. Almost right, but not quite. The skin was too smooth, the eyes too far apart, the mouth just a bit too wide. That thing had been inside the tower while I was sleeping, watching, practicing. I started checking every inch of the place after that. The vents, under the cot, behind the cabinets, looking for signs of entry, looking for him. That night, I barricaded the hatch and didn't sleep. Just before midnight, something whispered under the floorboards. Not loud, just a breath. "You're doing good, Hill. Soon you'll be ready." I don't know how I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the dark like it would blink back. Then I noticed something new on the map board by the window. A pin. Not one of mine. I never used those. But this one was stuck deep into the paper, right over Bitterroot Ridge. The gully. The throat. Next to it, written in small red marker, "Where they all end up." And beneath that in newer ink, "Tomorrow night. Your turn." I don't know if I slept at all that night. If I did, I didn't dream. Or maybe I did, and it was so awful, I've blocked it out. All I remember is the sound of the wind, not through the trees, but underneath the floorboards. It had a voice now, and it was starting to sound like everyone I knew. My boss at Station Command, my ex, my mom, all of them whispering things I should never have heard in the dark. You're not real, you know. We've already replaced you. They won't even notice you're gone. I kept every light on in the tower. Even the backup lanterns, left them burning hot until the air inside smelled like melted plastic and fried wiring. But it wasn't enough. I could feel him just beyond the glow, like he was circling, waiting for the bulbs to die. And one by one, they did. First, the string lights along the ceiling, then the desk lamp, then the solar lantern on the window shelf. By 3 a.m., only the emergency beacon was left, casting this sickly red light across the floor like a crime scene. I sat under it, shaking, clutching my knife, wondering if I should end this myself before he did it for me. But I didn't, because I saw the photo again. It had changed. Same shot, me, standing at the railing. But now I was turned around, looking directly at the camera, eyes wide, mouth slack, like I'd just seen something I couldn't process. And behind me, in the reflection, a second figure. Close, too close, and it wasn't me. He had the hoodie back on. Only this time, his face wasn't a blur. It was clear, too clear, and it looked exactly like mine, like someone had peeled my skin off and worn it like a goddamn Halloween mask. But the expression wasn't mine. The smile was wrong, tight and plastic, eyes bulging like they didn't fit the sockets. That was the moment I realized the truth. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to be me. It had done this before. Cody, the ranger before him, maybe others long before Station 59 even existed, lured them out, learned their voices, their habits, their minds, then took their place. And no one ever noticed. Because once the thing put on your skin, it knew exactly how to wear it. By sunrise, I'd made a plan. A stupid, desperate plan. But it was all I had. I was going to trap it. The flare gun had one shot left. I filled 2 lanterns with leftover gas from the backup generator. Then I dragged the old oil drum up from under the walkway and rolled it into the center of the platform. I waited until the sun hit the treetops. That was when he usually came. And right on cue, there he was, standing at the base of the ladder. Same green hoodie, same tilted head, same silence. He didn't climb. He waited, like he knew I'd come to him. And I did. I opened the hatch slowly and climbed down one rung at a time, keeping my eyes on him. He didn't move, just stared, no expression, like a blank canvas with my face painted over it. When I got to the bottom, I raised the flare gun. "I know what you are," I said. He smiled. But it wasn't surprise, it was relief. Like this was all part of the plan. He opened his mouth and said, in my exact voice, "Took you long enough." I fired. The flare caught him in the chest and lit up like napalm, tearing a scream out of him that sounded like every voice he'd ever stolen. It echoed through the trees like a siren underwater. He staggered back, arms flailing, face melting into something stretched and slick and not human, then collapsed into the brush, still burning. I didn't wait to see if he died. I climbed back up the ladder and dumped the lantern fuel into the oil drum. Then I lit it. Smoke poured into the sky in thick black columns, a distress signal, a funeral pyre, maybe both. Dispatch finally responded an hour later, sent a chopper. By the time they landed, the body was gone. No tracks, no ash, not even the hoodie, just drag marks leading straight back toward the throat. I told them it was a wild animal, maybe a bear, maybe a man who'd lost his mind. They believed me, because I still looked like me, still sounded like me. But I know better, because now at night when I close my eyes, I can still hear it crawling around inside the walls of my head, trying to finish what it started, trying to wear me from the inside out. I transferred a week later, told the supervisor I needed a break, mental health, burnout, whatever they wanted to hear. They signed the papers so fast it almost felt like they expected it. I never went back to Bitterroot Ridge, didn't even wait to pack up. Left the cot, the boots, even Cody's notebook. I didn't want any of it. I just wanted out, but I don't think it ever really let me leave. My new post was in southern Oregon, Mount Thien, quieter, less dense. They put me at a ranger station near Diamond Lake. No tower, just a cabin. One story, windows on every wall, supposed to feel less isolated. But it doesn't. On the first night there, I unpacked my duffel bag and found something I didn't bring. The hoodie, folded neatly. No mud, no blood, no burns, just sitting on top of my clean shirts. I almost threw it in the fire. Almost. But then I noticed the note tucked inside the hood. No handwriting, just stamped letters like a label from inside a jacket. This time, don't forget who you are. I didn't sleep. The next day, I hiked out to the ridge just to clear my head. Try to tell myself it wasn't real, that I imagined it. Trauma, hallucination, all that. Then I found the tooth. Just sitting in the snow, human, roots still red. It wasn't mine, but it looked like it could have been. That night, someone knocked on the window of the cabin. 3 times. Not hard, not aggressive. Just like a friend letting you know they'd arrived. I looked out. No one there. Then I checked the front porch. Bare footprints, leading toward the woods, not away. The next morning, I opened the cabin logbook to fill in my first report. There was already a message waiting for me, scribbled on the bottom margin in blocky, uneven handwriting. You think you survived? You didn't. I don't know how to explain what's happening now. I look in the mirror, and some days I recognize myself less and less. My smile feels looser. My voice sometimes comes out wrong when I speak too fast. I catch myself saying things I never meant to say, like I'm quoting someone who doesn't exist. The thing is, I don't remember ever losing myself. But maybe that's the trick. Maybe that's how it works. It doesn't steal you all at once. It slips in slow, quiet, familiar, until one day you're the one at the base of the tower. You're the one knocking on the window, and the real you is buried somewhere in the trees, still screaming with no mouth. So if you ever find yourself posted at a lookout tower somewhere no one visits, and you hear your own voice calling from the woods, don't answer. Because if it's already talking like you, it probably looks like you too. And by then, it's already too late. Can you tell me what time you are listening to this video? How do you feel about my video? If you like, please like and subscribe, and comment to let me know. That is a great motivation for me. Thank you guys. We were told never to enter Zone 13. One ranger did. I've worked for the National Park Service for 9 years now, most of it out west, Yellowstone, Zion, even Denali for a while. But nothing compares to the time I spent in Northern California, tucked deep into the Shasta Trinity National Forest. They assigned me to a ranger station about 2 hours from the nearest town, a speck of civilization called Weaverville. Population, maybe 3,500 if you count the dogs. The work was the usual. Trail checks, emergency calls, guiding lost hikers back to camp before dark. But every station has its own unwritten rules. You learn them from the guys who've been there too long. Most of the time it's stuff like, don't go into the gulch after rainfall. The mud eats trucks. Or, if you hear flute music past midnight, ignore it. Jokes, you think, until they're not. At Shasta, there was one rule carved into the corkboard above the desk in the ranger office. Do not enter Zone 13. Not for any reason. I figured it was a code. Maybe the area was unstable. Maybe it had old mines or something. Every ranger knew about it, but no one talked about it. If you asked, you'd just get a stare like you'd said something dirty in church. It wasn't even on the visitor maps. Just a chunk of the forest bordered by coordinates marked in faded red ink on a weathered topo map above the old fire safe. It took me 6 weeks to even bring it up with Martin, the oldest guy on our team. Quiet, retired military type, built like a tree stump and smelled faintly of menthol and burnt coffee. One night I asked him straight up after a few beers. Hey man, I said, what's with Zone 13? Martin didn't laugh. He didn't even look at me. Just said, don't go in there. Why not? I asked. He waited, sipped his beer, then said, we lost a guy in 97. Never found his pack. Not a footprint. Just gone. I pressed, trying to lighten the mood. So it's cursed? He gave me a look I'll never forget. Not angry, just tired. We found his boot 5 years later, hanging 20 feet up in a pine. No blood, no scratches, just one boot, laces still tied. I didn't ask again after that. Months passed. Nothing strange. I filed reports, handled drunken campers, even helped pull a black bear out of a porta potty once. You know, ranger stuff. Then around mid-September, we got a report of a missing couple. 30-somethings from Oregon. Real REI catalog types. They'd checked in at the northern trailhead, said they were hiking down toward a remote fishing stream. Hadn't shown up for their Airbnb checkout in Redding. When I checked their permit route, my stomach dropped. Their GPS tracker had last pinged right near the edge of Zone 13. Protocol said we wait 24 hours before sending a team, but I knew if we waited, they'd be bones and bare scat. So I radioed dispatch and told them I was heading out solo. It was about an hour before dusk when I hit the trail. My pack loaded and rifle slung over my shoulder, more out of habit than necessity. The forest felt different that evening, heavy somehow. The air smelled metallic, and the trees seemed closer together than usual. I found one of the couple's granola wrappers on a mossy log just off the path. That wasn't a good sign. Hikers don't litter out here, not the crunchy types. 30 minutes in, I found their tent, or rather what was left of it. The frame was still standing, but the fabric had been shredded like someone had taken a dozen box cutters to it. Not torn by animals. No claw marks, no bite holes, just cut. Long, clean slashes down every panel. Their gear was scattered, untouched. Backpack, shoes, clothes still folded. Even their hydro flask was upright. But there was no blood, no bodies, not even a trail. Just silence. I did a slow circle, heart pounding. My breath was loud. I tried radioing, but all I got was static. Then something buzzed behind me. I spun around, but it was just a fly. Or at least I thought it was, until I noticed the buzzing didn't stop. It grew. It was everywhere, coming from the trees, the soil, my goddamn boots, a low-frequency hum like a swarm of bees inside a metal drum. It made my jaw ache. My eyes watered. I backed away from the campsite, deeper into the woods without realizing it. And then I saw it. A tree. Not just a tree. The tree. It was wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. The bark looked melted, like plastic burned in a fire, and it wasn't standing straight. It leaned slightly, but the top seemed to twist like a spiral staircase. And the buzzing was loudest there. I approached. I don't know why. Curiosity, instinct, maybe something else. On the bark, someone had carved words. Not with a knife. They looked scratched in, like fingernails. The ground is hungry. Before I could even process that, I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, crashing through the brush. I raised my rifle and shouted, "This is the Park Service! Identify yourself!" Nothing, then whispering. It was close, behind my ear close. I turned. No one. But the tent was gone. Completely. Not collapsed. Just missing. Even the poles, as if it had never been there. And that was when I realized I had crossed into Zone 13. I froze. Every hair on my arms lifted. My instincts screamed at me to move, to run, but I couldn't tell which direction was out. My GPS was clipped to my chest rig, blinking red like it had just died. I tapped the screen. Nothing. No signal. No compass. Not even a damn clock. The tree with the twisted trunk was still there behind me, and the buzzing had faded to a low pulse, like it was under my skin now instead of in the air. I forced my legs to move and walked in what I thought was west. My boots sank deeper with every step. The soil here wasn't right. Damp, but not from rain. Thick and black like oil-soaked sand. I kept walking. 5 minutes. 10. And then I noticed something else. The birds were gone. No chirping. No squirrels. Not even the wind through the trees. Just silence. Then I spotted movement. At first I thought it was an animal, a deer, maybe, but it was standing upright. Motionless, just beyond the tree line, maybe 50 feet away. Its outline was all wrong. Too thin, too tall, limbs too long. I called out, "Hey, I'm with the Forest Service. Are you hurt?" No answer. Just a slow, jerky tilt of its head. I blinked, and it was gone. Not like it walked away. More like it flicked out of existence. Like a skipped frame in a video. Now I did start running. I don't know how long I sprinted, crashing through brambles and limbs that whipped my face and arms. I didn't care. I just needed out. Needed daylight. Needed something that felt real. Eventually, I stumbled into a clearing. My knees buckled, and I fell forward into the dirt, panting. Then I saw the fire ring. Charcoal, burnt logs, empty beer cans, old ones, faded, rusted, Coors Light pull-tab style, the kind they haven't made since the 80s. Next to the ring was a rotted backpack. The canvas was split wide open, like it had been slashed. Inside was a spiral notebook, its cover swollen from rain and time. I flipped it open. The writing was barely legible, smeared and chaotic, but one sentence was underlined, scrawled across an entire page in shaking black ink. I've walked for 3 days and keep ending up back here. It's not letting me leave. I dropped the notebook. My fingers were trembling. I could feel something watching me again. I spun in a slow circle, trying to stay calm, but there was no path. Just dense trees in every direction. Then I heard voices. Far away. Echoing. But familiar. Radios. Barking dogs. Search and rescue. I bolted toward the sound. Branches clawed at my arms. I nearly ate dirt multiple times, but I kept going. And sure enough, I saw headlamps through the trees. 4 or 5 of them. Hey! I screamed. Hey, over here! The lights paused. Then one turned toward me. I saw figures. People. Shapes in uniform. I broke through the last of the brush, falling at their feet. They didn't move. Didn't speak. The lights weren't attached to headlamps. They were floating. One blinked out. Then another. Then all of them. I was in pitch black. Then the buzzing started again. Louder. Closer. Like it was inside my skull. I tried to scream, but my voice died in my throat. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I felt something pulling me down. Not gravity. Not vertigo. Like the ground was breathing in, and I was the air. I staggered backward and tripped. When I hit the dirt, the world tilted. The clearing snapped back into place. The lights were gone. The trees looked normal again. No sounds. No whispering. No footprints. But in the dirt beside me, freshly carved, were the words, "Stay, you're one of us now." And below that, my name. Not my badge number, not Ranger, my full name. First, middle, and last, written like someone had been waiting. I don't remember standing up. 1 second, I was on my knees, staring at my name scrawled into the dirt like a headstone. The next, I was moving again, stumbling through brush with blood in my mouth and panic screaming inside my skull. The air had changed again. It wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, warm, like the inside of an animal's mouth. And it stank, not like rotting meat. Something older, like moldy fur and copper, like wet pennies soaked in a dead thing's breath. I knew I was deep now, deeper than I should have been. The trees were thicker, bark all gnarled and blistered like it had grown tumors. Some trunks had holes, not natural ones, but carved perfect circles, like someone had drilled into them long ago and never came back to finish. And then I saw the markers. Not official trail signs, no paint or flags. These were bones. Small ones, hung from branches in delicate patterns, strung with twine that looked handmade, like vines twisted and sun-bleached. I stopped beneath one that had what looked like a child's jawbone swinging gently in the still air. That's when I heard the voices again, closer this time. Low, murmuring, male and female. Not whispering, but not loud either, like people trying not to be overheard. I crouched instinctively and crept forward, trying to stay quiet. I moved through the trees like a ghost, the way they train us in search and rescue when we're tracking someone who might be armed or unstable. My boot caught on a root and I almost went down, but I caught myself against a tree. That's when I saw the fire. Not orange, blue, burning low in a small clearing ahead. Around it were 3 people. At least, I think they were people. They were wearing tattered hiking gear, layers of mismatched clothes that looked decades old. One of them had duct tape around their head, covering their eyes. Another was barefoot, toes black with dirt or blood, maybe both. The third one turned suddenly like they heard me, and I swear to God, their mouth stretched too far when they smiled. "Hey!" the barefoot one called out, voice thin and cheerful, like they were greeting a neighbor across the fence. Another one? I didn't answer. The one with the tape around their face sniffed the air, then tilted their head and muttered, "Fresh! Still has skin on." The one who smiled took a step toward me, arms out. "Don't be scared. You're just early, that's all." I ran. Didn't think. Didn't speak. Just tore through the woods like something was chasing me, though I never turned around to check. My arms were scratched raw. My breath came in rasps. I ran until my knees buckled, and I hit the ground hard, head smacking against a rock or root. I must have blacked out, because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. Real morning. Sunlight cutting through the canopy in golden streaks. Bird songs filling the air. I sat up. My body ached. My shirt was soaked through with sweat and maybe some blood. I was alone. No fire, no bone charms, no blue flames or barefoot freaks. With two wide grins, I pulled my GPS from my pack. Dead. No surprise. I climbed a ridge, desperate to gain elevation. Found a signal flickering like a dying light bulb, just enough to ping my coordinates. I wasn't in Zone 13 anymore. I was 4 miles from where I'd started. No trail, no markers. But I knew how to get back. My training kicked in. I made it to a ranger station by nightfall. Not my own, but a remote field post manned by a part-timer named Scott. He took one look at me and said, "Jesus Christ, you look like hell." I asked him if there was a working radio. He nodded. I called it in, told them I needed evac, claimed I slipped, got turned around, nothing more. I didn't say a word about the fire or the people or the buzzing. Not yet. They sent a chopper the next morning. When I got back, Martin was waiting. He didn't ask questions, didn't scold, just handed me a cigarette and a coffee, then muttered, "You went in, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He said, "Check your phone." So I did. There were pictures, grainy, dark, like they'd been taken through a fogged-up window. And in each one, I was asleep in the dirt in the woods, and always behind me, just in the shadows, a figure. Different in each photo. Sometimes tall, sometimes hunched. One was crawling on all fours. One had no face. The last photo, it was a close-up of me, eyes open, staring dead at the camera. I never took that picture. Martin just said, "Zone 13 doesn't let go. You might have left it, but it didn't leave you." I didn't sleep for days after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw trees leaning toward me. I heard whispering in a language I don't think exists. Worse, I felt watched, like something had hitched a ride back with me, just sitting quiet in the backseat of my mind. I didn't quit right away. I told myself I could push through it. Pretend it hadn't happened. Hell, maybe I wanted to believe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, dehydration, some rogue mold spores, whatever excuse kept my brain from snapping in two. But then the photos started changing. I deleted them all, wiped my phone clean, reset everything. I even swapped phones, bought a new one at the Target in Reading. But one night, I was scrolling through my gallery and there it was again. That same photo. The one of me staring into the lens like a corpse that had just remembered how to blink. It was in a folder called Recents. I don't have any apps that auto backup. I didn't even have service. That's when I started seeing her. She wasn't part of the original trip. I'm sure of it. The couple that went missing, I reviewed their file 3 times. Mark Dunley and Caitlin Fry, both 36, drove a white Subaru Forester and brought a golden retriever named Max. We found the car, found the dog, dead, unfortunately. But there was never a mention of anyone else. But now I keep seeing this woman in my dreams. She's wearing a red Columbia jacket, hiking boots. Her black hair is braided, and her skin is sunburned like she's been out there for days. In the dream, she stands at the edge of the clearing with the blue fire, just stands there, staring into it, while those things talk to each other behind her. She doesn't look scared. She looks resigned, like she belongs. I saw her for real 2 weeks later. It was during a public safety sweep. I was with 2 other rangers, Callum and Eric. We were checking trail markers after a big storm swept through. Normal stuff. We'd parked the ATVs near Pine Ridge, maybe a mile north of Zone 13's edge, far enough not to raise red flags. We were halfway through a downed log detour when Callum stopped dead and pointed into the trees. "Is that a person?" Sure enough, about 30 yards away, partially obscured by low branches, was a figure. Red jacket, braided hair, just standing. "Ma'am?" I called out. "Do you need assistance?" She didn't respond. Callum and Eric flanked around while I moved forward slowly. "We're with the Park Service. If you're lost, we can help." Still no answer. When I got close enough, I saw she was barefoot. Her soles were blackened with sap and mud. She had pine needles stuck in her braid, and her eyes were glassy, staring past me like I wasn't even there. Then she smiled. Not creepy, not overly wide or strange, just a soft, sad little smile, like she knew something I didn't. and then she turned and walked into a pine. Into it. No opening, no crevice. Just bark and trunk, like she melted through it. Eric came running up seconds later, breathless. Where'd she go? I pointed to the tree. I don't know. Callum radioed it in. We filed a report, said she was hallucinating, that she ran off. We had to say that, because if we'd told the truth, they'd have put us under psych evals, or worse, kicked us off the force and buried the paperwork. But that night, she showed up in my room. Not physically. Not at first. It started with that smell again, the same warm, rotten copper and dirt scent from Zone 13. I woke up gagging, heart pounding. The cabin was dark except for the blinking light on the router. Then my phone lit up. No call. No message. Just a picture. Her face. Close up. Blurry but unmistakable. Captioned underneath in plain white font. You brought it back. I flung the phone across the room and grabbed my radio. Static. Dead. I slept in my truck that night. Engine running. Keys clenched in my hand. But sleep's not the problem anymore. Waking up is. Because now, every morning, something has changed. My toothbrush is wet, even if I didn't use it. There are fresh boot prints by the door, smaller than mine. Twice now, I've found moss on my floorboards. And this morning, there was a voice on the baby monitor we use for the outpost's weather station. Just one word played on a loop. Stay. I haven't told anyone yet, but I think Zone 13 is leaking. The worst part about something following you is realizing you let it in. It's not like a raccoon breaking into your tent or a storm sneaking up on a ridge. Those things are obvious, real. What I brought back from Zone 13, it's quieter, patient, like it knows it has time. I started hearing the trees whispering at night, not the wind, not animals. I know what both of those sound like. This was different. A dry rustling, rhythmic, almost human, like breath through teeth. Like words just below hearing. And then things started going missing. First, it was small stuff. My compass, an old flashlight, one of my boots. I thought maybe raccoons dragged them off, or a rookie ranger borrowed something without asking. But then a chunk of my journal went missing. Pages ripped out clean, right down the middle of an entry I'd written about the red jacket woman. The next day, the pages were back, but the handwriting on them wasn't mine. The loops were tight, frantic, scratched deep into the paper, like whoever wrote it was pressing hard enough to rip through. There were only 2 lines. The roots go deeper than you think. Stop digging. I burned the pages. It didn't help. Martin noticed I'd gone quiet. He tried to pull me aside after our morning sweep, said I looked like death warmed over, and asked if I was using. I laughed in his face and told him I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a week. He got real still, said, "It's picking at you. That's how it starts." I asked, "What does?" He shook his head. Zone 13 isn't a place. Not really. It's a crack. And once you're close enough to hear what's inside, it hears you too. Then it doesn't matter if you leave. You're marked. He said he knew because he had been marked once too, back in '88. Before they called it Zone 13, before it was even on the internal maps, they used to just call it the Crooked Hollow. But after 5 rangers disappeared over the years, one of them Martin's own cousin, they gave it a new name and started pretending it didn't exist. I asked him what he saw in there. He didn't answer, just pulled up his sleeve. The scar on his arm looked like it had teeth marks, not animal, human. Jaw too narrow, too many incisors. You ever seen a forest spit someone out?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. That night, the door to my cabin opened by itself. I'd locked it, triple-checked, even jammed a wedge under it. Didn't matter. It creaked open slow, like something knew I was waiting for it. I stood in the hallway with a knife in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The beam shook with my grip, flickering against the open frame. There was nothing there. Just the trail outside, glowing faintly under the moon. And the footprints, bare, fresh, leading in. The smell was back. Wet pennies, mushrooms, rot, and the whispering. The whispering was so loud, I nearly dropped to my knees. Then a voice, clearer than the rest, cut through. Not loud, just inside me. "Come back." I ran. I didn't pack. I didn't leave a note. I jumped in the truck and tore down the dirt road so fast I nearly flipped it on a blind corner. I drove until sunrise, all the way to a Best Western outside Chico, slept in the parking lot with a pocket knife clenched in my fist. When I went inside to get a room, the receptionist asked if I was with the forestry department. I said yes. She smiled and handed me a key. "I think she's already waiting for you," she said. I froze. "Who?" I asked. The receptionist looked confused. "Your wife," she said. "Didn't you say she'd check in ahead of you?" Said her name was Caitlin. My blood turned to ice. Caitlin Fry was the woman who went missing from the original couple, the one we never found. I took the key. Room 207. When I opened the door, the room was dark. Curtains drawn, TV static crackling on mute, the air ripe with soil and mildew, and something else. Something crawling. There was someone sitting on the edge of the bed, still facing away from me, wearing a red Columbia jacket, bare feet flat on the carpet. "Caitlin?" I said. She didn't turn, but in the reflection of the TV I saw her face. It wasn't the one from the missing persons file. It was mine. Twisted, half melted, eyes wide with something that wasn't shock or fear, but understanding. I backed out of the room and slammed the door. When I looked again, the room number was gone. Just a blank door, like no one had ever stayed there. But when I got back in the truck, my name badge was gone. In its place, tucked neatly into the driver's seat, was a compass, the old one, the one I lost in Zone 13. The needle was spinning, and on the back, scratched into the metal like a warning left too late, were 3 words, "You were warned." I didn't go back to Shasta right away. I couldn't. I drifted from motel to motel, losing time. Days slipped through my fingers like fog. I'd wake up in strange towns with pine needles in my pockets, dirt under my nails. No memory of how I got there. Once I came to in a diner bathroom. Blood on my shirt, not mine. And a matchbook in my hand that read, Trailhead Bar, Tula Lake. I'd never been to Tula Lake. But the bartender knew my name. He didn't ask for a tab, just nodded and said, "You still smell like the forest." Eventually, I got tired of running. You can only fight gravity so long before you let it pull you under. So I went back. Told Martin I needed to speak with him alone. We sat in the back of the supply shed, the air thick with gasoline and sweat. I laid it all out, everything. The woman, the photos, the whispering, the motel, the compass. Even the voice that had started answering my thoughts at night when the walls went quiet. He didn't flinch, just stared at the floor, hands on his knees, like he was waiting for the part where I'd finally admit it. "You hear it now?" he said. Not a question. I nodded. He lit a cigarette with fingers that shook. "Once it knows your name," he said, "it doesn't matter where you are. You could be sitting in a Starbucks in downtown LA. It'll find you." I asked if there was any way to stop it. He exhaled, slow. "You can give it someone else. That's what the stories say. Feed the ground. Trade one voice for another." He didn't have to say it. I knew what he meant. I stood up and walked out without another word. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I got called to respond to another missing person report. Solo hiker, young guy from Nevada, TikTok type. Posted himself doing handstands on cliff edges and swimming naked in glacier lakes. GPS showed his last ping not far from where I found the red jacket woman. They told me to wait for backup. I didn't. I knew what I had to do. The trail swallowed me quick, like it had been waiting. The trees leaned in, thicker, darker, wetter. The sky turned slate-colored, no matter what the forecast said. I found his camp near the river bend. Tent half collapsed, gear untouched. He was inside, alive, sleeping. He looked peaceful, mouth half open, drooling into his sleeping bag. Didn't even stir when I unzipped the flap. I stared at him for a long time. I saw his phone charging off a solar pack, open to a selfie he'd just taken, smiling, carefree. I saw the compass in my hand, the needle finally still pointing one way. I knew what it wanted. I turned away, walked 20 feet into the trees, and screamed, "Take me!" Instead, everything stopped, even the wind. Then something moved behind me, slow, deliberate, heavy. The forest exhaled. When I turned back to the tent, it was gone. So was the boy. The riverbed was dry now, the stones black and glossy like they'd been burned. I fell to my knees. The buzzing came again, louder than ever. But now it felt inside me, like it had always been there, just waiting to wake up. That's when I realized the truth. There was never a trade, never a choice. Zone 13 doesn't bargain. It waits. And when you step over that invisible line, even for a second, you're not a visitor. You're soil. Now, I'm the one who writes the warning on the corkboard. Do not enter Zone 13. Not for any reason. Because it's not about curiosity or bravery. It's about containment. And if you feel the urge to find it, that pull in your chest that makes you want to see what's past the last trail marker, that means it already knows your name. And it's already begun digging. I read the logs from a ranger who went missing in 1997. I used to work for the National Park Service. Not going to say which park because I still have friends out there, but I'll tell you this much. It was one of the bigger ones. Vast, dense, beautiful. And if you've ever stood out there past sunset with nothing but wind in your ears and trees creaking like old bones, you'll understand why some folks don't come back. It started when I transferred from the visitor center to field patrol, the solo kind. You hike trails, log damage, check for signs of campers where there shouldn't be any, monitor the fire risk. Most of it's boring as hell, lonely but peaceful. Then one afternoon, I found a locked drawer in the back of our ranger cabin. It was wedged behind an old map case, barely noticeable. I asked around. No one seemed to know who had the key or what was inside. But one of the older rangers, a guy named Ree, just stared at me too long when I brought it up. Said some drawers don't need opening. Then walked off. I didn't let it go. A couple nights later, I stayed late after my shift, waited till the station emptied out, and used a crowbar from the shed. Took some effort, but the drawer finally gave. Inside were a bunch of notebooks, water-stained, half-moldy, reeking of mildew, and that weird dusty smell like they hadn't been touched in decades. They were field logs, handwritten, labeled Ranger Howell, and dated 1996 to early 97. Thing is, nobody by that name worked here. Not on any of the rosters, not on any park memorials. Like the guy didn't exist. But the notes were real, and the more I read, the worse it got. January 3rd, 1997, patrolled West Ridge. Found shredded sleeping bag near old fire pit. No gear, just blood. Tagged the site. Filing report later. January 9th, same section. Heard someone coughing deep in the trees. Didn't investigate. Had a weird feeling. Not scared exactly, just not alone. January 15th, saw a man watching me from the ridge above Coldwater Bend. Tall, lanky. Couldn't make out his face. Waved. He didn't wave back. At first, I thought it might be a prank. Some junior ranger trying to spook us. But the logs kept going in neat, sharp handwriting, getting more fragmented, more paranoid. He'd scrawl pages about footprints that circled his cabin at night, about whispers that sounded like his own voice echoing through the trees. He started sleeping with a hatchet. Said he found animal bones arranged like signs outside his door. By the time I hit the March entries, my stomach felt like it was clenching itself inside out. March 4th, found a boot, just one, half buried in snow, foot still inside. March 6th, radio dead, nobody answers. I walk to the tower, but it's empty. Everything's empty. Then the logs stopped. No final page, no goodbye, just a smear of what looked like dried mud on the last entry. And that was it. I put the journal back in the drawer and didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I asked our head ranger if he'd ever heard of a Howell. He said no. Told me the name didn't match anyone who ever worked in the region. But later that week, I drove to a nearby ranger outpost for a supply pickup. Got talking with an old guy at the front desk. Retired ranger. Came in every now and then for coffee. Just made small talk until I casually mentioned the name Howell. His smile vanished. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and said, "Don't mess with that. Howell's the one they never found. He stayed too long in Sector 9, alone." I didn't know what Sector 9 was. That area wasn't marked on any of our official trail maps. I asked him where it was. He didn't answer. Just sipped his drink, stared out the window and muttered, "They don't print it on maps for a reason." I went back to work like nothing happened. Did my usual rounds. made my reports, drank too much coffee from the old Keurig that tasted like cardboard and burnt rubber. But something had changed. I started watching the tree line more, listening too long to sounds I used to ignore. Every crack of a branch in the underbrush made my heart race. I couldn't stop thinking about that drawer, about Howell, about the old man whispering Sector 9 like a curse. A few days later, I waited until shift change and snuck into the archive shed. The old one, no one really used anymore. Found a busted file cabinet in the back full of mildewed papers and manila folders that looked like they hadn't seen daylight since Clinton was in office. Took me almost an hour of digging before I found it, tucked inside a water-stained folder labeled Unverified Trails. West Quadrant. A hand-drawn map. No coordinates, no legend, just scratchy outlines and a single label scrawled in faded red ink. S9. There it was. Sector 9. Off trail. No roads. The closest access point was a half-mile from the Ranger roads, way past Pine Loop, deep in a zone we were technically not even supposed to patrol solo. But it was there. Not a myth. Not something Howell made up. And like an idiot, I decided to go. I told my supervisor I was doing an overnighter at Riverbach to survey for erosion damage. Signed out a sat phone, packed light, just enough gear to make it through a cold night. My truck couldn't make it past the old logging trail, so I hiked the rest. Took me 4 hours of dense brush, uneven terrain, and the kind of silence that makes you question whether the world just forgot about you. I found the boundary marker just before dusk, a splintered wooden post half swallowed by vines. Someone had carved S9 into the side, deep and ragged, like they were in a rush. Beyond that post, everything felt off. The air was colder still. Not dead silent, but quieter. Birds didn't chirp. Insects didn't buzz. I didn't even hear the wind anymore. Just this weird ambient hum in the back of my skull, like a headache was trying to start. That first hour in the zone, I felt watched. Not from one direction either, like I was being sized up from every angle, all at once. You ever walk into a room and know someone had just been talking about you? That heat in the spine. Multiply that by 10 and make it last for miles. I kept hiking, telling myself I was being paranoid, tired, maybe dehydrated. But when I reached the small clearing where I planned to camp, I stopped dead. There was a structure, not a cabin, not a ranger post, just a crude shack made of splintered timber and rusted sheet metal, partially collapsed, half covered in ivy. No windows. The door was barely holding on by one hinge. I didn't go in right away. I circled it slow, looking for footprints, tracks, anything. But the ground was dead around it. Not trampled, not soft, like nothing had moved in or out in years, except the door. It was open, freshly. The top hinge was still swinging gently when I got close. No breeze, no animals, just that quiet metallic creak. I stepped inside, holding my flashlight low. Dirt floor, empty cans in the corner, a ratty sleeping bag shoved against the far wall, and in the center of the shack, surrounded by a ring of dark ash, was a ranger's hat. I picked it up. The inside band was still stained with sweat, old but preserved, and stitched on the tag, nearly faded to nothing, were the letters. H. Howell. I remember hearing something right then. A crunch outside. Soft, deliberate, like a footstep on dry pine needles. I turned off the flashlight, sat completely still. Another crunch, then silence. I don't know how long I waited. Could have been a minute, could have been half an hour. But I didn't hear anything else. When I finally stepped out of the shack, the trail behind me was different. The bushes were pushed in. Branches snapped waist high. Someone had been there, standing just outside, watching. I slept with my knife open and my sat phone pressed to my chest. And I didn't sleep long because just after 2 a.m. I heard the crunching again. Closer. This time it circled the shack. Slow, deliberate, like whoever or whatever was out there wanted me to hear it. The footsteps didn't stop. They just kept pacing around the shack. Soft, steady crunches like someone was walking barefoot on dry needles and gravel. Not running, not sneaking, just circling over and over. At first, I thought it was a bear or a cougar, but there was a pattern to it, a rhythm. 3 steps. Pause. 5 more. Pause. Then 2 quick ones, like a shuffle. Then nothing for several seconds. It was too deliberate. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe hard. Just gripped the knife and sat there with the sat phone in my lap, trying not to panic. The phone had no signal, by the way. Dead weight. Might as well have been a brick. I tried to text anyway. In S9, possible stalker, send backup, but the bar never filled. The message sat there, stuck on sending. Around 2:47 a.m., the steps stopped altogether. But I didn't hear anyone walk away. No crunching retreat. Just silence. That unbearable stillness again, like the air itself was listening. And then came the knock. One single tap on the shack wall. Not the door. The wall directly behind where I was sitting. I nearly pissed myself. It was knuckles, not claws, not a branch falling. A clear, deliberate knock. Just once. And then a voice. It was low, hoarse, like someone who hadn't had water in days. A man's voice. "You took my hat!" I froze. Every hair on my arm stood up like needles. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was quiet. Calm. Like he'd been standing there all night, just waiting for me to realize it. I didn't answer. I didn't even look. The voice didn't come again. No more knocks. I sat in that goddamn shack until daylight bled in through the cracks in the walls and the birds finally started chirping again. When I opened the door, no one was there. No tracks. No signs of anything or anyone except the trees. The trees around the shack weren't right. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. They were bent inward toward the clearing, like something had been leaning on them. Like a dozen tall figures had stood just out of view all night, hunched into the canopy. And then I saw the tree closest to the shack. Someone had scratched into the bark with something sharp. Maybe a hunting knife. Maybe fingernails. I stepped up and read it out loud without meaning to. Stay with me. The shack. The logs. The hat. Howell never left. I didn't eat. Didn't drink. Just packed up and hiked out as fast as my legs would take me. The whole way back, I felt eyes on me. And every 30 minutes or so, I'd hear movement, quick and light, just behind me, just far enough that I couldn't turn fast enough to see it. Once, I swear I heard my own voice say my name. Not someone calling my name, saying it, like a statement, like this is who you are now. When I made it back to the Ranger Road, I damn near collapsed. My knees were shaking, my lips cracked from dehydration. My sat phone started pinging signal again. And the message I'd tried to send the night before had failed. It didn't bounce back, just disappeared, like it never left the phone. I didn't report what happened. What was I supposed to say? That a ghost ranger whispered through the shack wall and tried to get me to stay? That I heard footsteps all night and found trees bowing inward like they'd been watching me? Even if I tried to tell someone, they'd just say it was fatigue. Paranoia. Too much time alone in the woods. Hell, maybe that's all it was. Except when I got back to the main station, I made a mistake. I went back to the drawer, back to the logs. But this time, when I pulled them out, there was an extra journal on top. Newer, cleaner. My name was on it in handwriting that wasn't mine. Inside was only one entry. You came to me just like the others. You know the woods better than anyone. You belong here. You understand. The world outside doesn't want you. Stay. Just stay. And on the second page, written in faint red ink, I took your message. I'll answer next time. I quit 2 days later, didn't give notice, didn't clean out my locker, just left the keys on the counter and drove until my tank ran dry. I rented a motel room 2 towns over, still smelling like smoke and damp moss, and I didn't sleep the entire first night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shack again. Not just in my memory, in detail, like I was still inside it. The groaning wood, the cold ring of ash, that hat. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, just stress, right? Mental fatigue. The mind plays tricks on you when you're isolated for too long. That's what they always say. I almost believed it until my second night in that motel. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to find the door unlocked. Not just unlocked, wide open, swinging gently in the breeze like someone had just walked through it. I hadn't opened it. I triple-checked it before bed. There were no cars in the lot outside, no guests on my floor, no sounds except for a distant creak like metal scraping pavement or dragging something heavy. I grabbed the desk lamp and stepped to the doorway, heart hammering in my throat. Nothing there. But when I looked down, I saw it on the threshold, a pine needle. One, just lying there in the middle of the rug. I hadn't been near a tree in over 48 hours. That morning, I left the motel, found a Starbucks, and tried to use their Wi-Fi to search anything I could about Sector 9. Ranger Howell. Missing persons. Local disappearances. I expected nothing. Instead, I found a thread buried in an old forum from 2008. One of those weird survivalist boards that looks like it hasn't been updated in years. The post was titled, "Anyone hiked S9? Found Bone Circle plus boot?" There were no replies. Just a single user named Backtrail Reaper saying he found a boot with a foot in it while mapping old ranger stations. He mentioned hearing someone call his name in his voice. Said he saw figures at the edge of campfires, that they never came close. Just watched. Then nothing. No follow-ups. The account hadn't posted since. I clicked on his profile. Only one image ever uploaded. It was low quality, grainy, black and white. A photo of the shack. And through the broken window, a man. Just a silhouette, wearing a ranger's hat. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled my coffee all over the table. I left it, rushed outside, tried to get air. But the moment I stepped into the parking lot, I stopped cold. My car, there were pine needles scattered across the hood, laid out like they'd been arranged. 6 of them, pointing toward the woods across the highway. No wind, no storm, just a perfect row of needles, all pointing in the same direction, like a trail. I drove straight to the next town, changed my name, got a job at a gas station, kept my head down. I figured whatever followed me, whatever Howell was, maybe it would fade. Maybe if I ignored it, it would get bored and find someone else. That worked for a while. A few months passed. I didn't see or hear anything. No whispers, no knocks, nothing in my dreams. Then about 6 weeks ago, someone left a package on my porch. No return address. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook and a ranger's patch. The notebook had my name on the front. The first page read, "The woods remember. You left something behind." And underneath that, in tiny letters, almost invisible unless you tilted the page, "You opened the drawer. That means you're next." I didn't open the notebook for days. I kept it shut, tucked it under a pile of old clothes in my closet, like a cursed object from a movie. But it was real. Too real. I could feel it when I was near it, like heat radiating from a stove burner that wasn't even turned on. And the worst part? That damn ranger patch. It wasn't new. It was worn, dirt-stained, frayed around the edges. The stitching was nearly gone. It was Howell's. I knew it. I didn't need proof. The night after the package arrived, I started hearing the noises again. Not in the woods this time. In my walls, my attic, the crawl space beneath the floorboards, scraping, dragging, breathing. And then the smell. Anyone who spent time in the backcountry knows it. That thick, coppery stench of wet fur, rot old blood. The kind of smell that tells your body something died nearby. I checked every vent, every crawl space. Found nothing until I got to the basement. There, pinned to the wooden support beam near the water heater, was a single pine needle jammed in like a nail, held in place by something I didn't want to touch. Something dark and sticky that had dried into the wood. I ripped it down and locked the basement behind me. But I knew. I knew the message was clear. You can leave the forest, but it doesn't leave you. I finally opened the notebook. Inside, it was written in the same sharp handwriting as Howell's logs. Same odd phrasing, same strange spacing. It started with my name. Redacted entered the boundary at 7:48 TARS. Stayed overnight, saw the shack, heard the call, felt the weight. Good. He's learning. He will be the next. I flipped through the pages in a panic. The entries weren't past events. They were predictions, written like a future log. He'll deny it first, hide, try to live like the rest of them, but it will call again. And when he returns, he'll see the others. The ones who stayed, the ones who didn't speak, who watch, who whisper. He'll walk the perimeter 3 times. He'll find the second shack, and beneath it, the pit. There were dozens of entries, all describing me, my actions, my reactions, conversations I hadn't had yet, places I hadn't seen. And then, at the bottom of one page in heavy ink, he will write this down. Exactly like this, he will share it. And still, no one will believe him. I slammed the notebook shut and threw it in the garbage behind the gas station where I worked. Burned the patch with a lighter in the sink. The flame turned green for half a second. I swear to God. The next morning, the notebook was back on my nightstand. No smell, no signs of entry. Just sitting there, waiting. I started seeing people at the edge of things, at the grocery store, in the reflection of windows, just beyond streetlights at night. Tall, still shapes, some of them wearing hats. They never approached. They didn't need to. I knew what they were. Rangers who never left. Campers who wandered off trail. Hikers who followed the sound of their own voice and found something else on the other end. I've been marked, tagged like wildlife, like I'm being monitored, studied. And 2 days ago, someone sent me an email from a dummy address. No subject line, no text in the body, just one attachment. A trail cam photo. Low res, black and white. It showed a clearing in the woods, fog hanging low, and a figure tall, broad-shouldered, standing in the middle, wearing a ranger uniform, holding something in his hand. I zoomed in, and my throat closed up. He was holding the notebook. And behind him, in the tree line, there were dozens of eyes watching. I'm not sure how much time I have left. Not because I think someone's coming for me. No, they've already been here. I just don't know when they'll stop watching and start moving. When they'll decide it's time to finish what was started in that forgotten piece of forest. It's happening again. Last night I woke up in the middle of the floor. Not my bed, not the couch, just the hardwood, lying flat, face up, eyes open. And my boots were on. I don't remember putting them on. The soles were dirty, mud-caked, pine needles stuck to the laces. I checked the locks, the windows, the basement, all sealed. But the air, it smelled like rain and moss and ash, the same way it smelled inside that shack in Sector 9. I checked my phone's GPS history. There was a 4-hour gap between midnight and 4 a.m. The location pin was just a blank patch of forest, unmarked, west of where I used to work. No trails, no road access, a dead zone. I think I went back. I think they called me, and I answered. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm not asking anyone to believe me. I'm writing this because someone will find it eventually. Maybe you already have. Maybe you're a new ranger. Maybe you're just a hiker who saw something strange, a cabin where there shouldn't be one, a voice calling your name that sounds a little too much like you. This story ends soon. Not just for me, maybe for you too. I've been seeing a new figure lately. Not in the woods, in the mirror. Sometimes, when I walk past, I catch him standing differently, wearing the old uniform, hat pulled low, dirt on his cheeks, a little smile like he's been waiting for this moment a long, long time. And this morning, the notebook was open on my kitchen table. I didn't leave it there. I swear I didn't. There was a fresh page, handwritten. My own handwriting. I finally understand. I've always belonged to the woods. I just forgot. But they didn't. I'll go back tonight. I know the way now. If you're reading this, don't come looking. Don't try to find Sector 9. They won't let you leave. Not really. Not forever. They let me leave once so I could bring someone back. Now it's your turn. I caught a man in a park ranger uniform who wasn't one of us. I've worked as a ranger in Olympic National Park for almost 8 years now. That place is beautiful in the kind of way that makes you forget how dangerous it can be. Towering evergreens, fog-thick valleys, rivers that sound like whispering voices if you're alone too long. It's the kind of terrain that feels ancient, like it's watching you more than you're watching it. Most of my job is boring stuff. Trail checks, radioing hikers who stayed out too late, dragging dumbasses out of restricted areas. But every once in a while, you get a call that doesn't sit right, the kind where your gut clenches before the radio even goes quiet. This started about a month ago, early spring. The trails were still slushy with snow melt, which meant fewer crowds. I was posted at the Hoh Rainforest Outpost, pretty remote. No cell reception, just a data-dakey ranger radio and the occasional flyover from search and rescue. I'd been on evening patrol heading toward the Blue Glacier Spur when I spotted someone ahead of me on the trail. He had the uniform, brown slacks, green jacket, wide-brimmed hat. From the back, everything looked legit. But the way he was standing, arms stiff at his sides, head tilted like he was listening too hard to something I couldn't hear. I called out, "Hey, you from the Fork station." I figured maybe they sent someone to assist with some storm damage we'd had earlier in the week. The guy didn't move, didn't even flinch. I walked closer, trying not to sound weird about it. "You good, man?" When I was maybe 20 feet away, he turned. I don't know how else to say it. Something was off about his face. Not wrong in an obvious way. He looked normal. Except, it was too normal, like someone trying to copy what a person should look like. His eyes didn't track right. He blinked too slow, like he was trying to remember when to do it. And his uniform, it looked about right, but the patches were sewn in the wrong places. Name tag was missing. His badge was plastic, not even the right font. I felt my stomach tighten. "You got ID?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but assertive. He stared at me, then smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. His lips moved like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. I instinctively reached for my radio. "This is Unit 11 at trail marker 22 near Glacier Point. I've got an unidentified individual in what looks like ranger gear. No ID. Unresponsive. Requesting backup or verification on visiting staff." There was a pause. Then the reply came, crackling through. "Copy that, Unit 11. There's no visiting personnel assigned to your sector today. Confirm again. Over." I looked up. The guy was gone. Just vanished. Like I blinked and he stepped behind a tree. Only there were no trees close enough to hide behind. The nearest thicket was across the trail, at least 15 feet away. And there was no sound, no crunch of leaves, no branches snapping, no breathing. I stood there, heart thudding in my ears, scanning every inch of the trail. The sun was almost gone by then, and the shadows were starting to get thick. I didn't see him again that night, but I didn't sleep much either. Every creak of the cabin floorboards, every gust of wind scraping the side of the outpost had me reaching for the rifle locked under my cot. The worst part? When I checked the log the next morning, someone had opened the supply shed, but it was still locked. From the inside. I told myself the lock thing was just a mistake. Maybe I'd left it ajar the night before, and the wind blew it open. Maybe someone else came by, someone with a key. I even asked around during the next radio check-in. Fork said no one had been sent out. Port Angeles said the same. Still, I filed an incident report just in case. The following few days were quiet. Cold mornings, foggy afternoons, standard maintenance patrols. But I kept thinking about that guy, the silent ranger, the fake badge, the plastic grin. I kept replaying that moment where he just wasn't there anymore. No noise, no movement. Like he had blinked out of existence. Then hikers started coming in with odd reports. A group of college kids from Spokane stopped by the station 2 days after my sighting. They were rattled. Nothing extreme, but definitely spooked. Said they'd seen a man standing in the tree line near the waterfall trail. Just standing, not moving. When they waved at him, he turned around and walked into the forest. No trail or anything, just disappeared between the trees. One of them, a girl in a puffy North Face jacket, said it felt like he wanted them to follow, like he was leading them somewhere. But something about him felt fake. Like it was a trick. That word hit me hard. I asked what he looked like. Same uniform, same wide-brimmed hat. Said he didn't speak, just stood there with this weird frozen expression, like he was waiting for something. After they left, I decided to hike that trail again myself. There's a spot along that path, not even a real marker, just a subtle shift in the dirt, like the trail splits for a few feet before merging back. Nobody ever takes the fork. It's a runoff route meant to divert rainwater in storms, not for hikers. But when I got to it, I stopped. There were footprints in the mud. Boot prints. Big ones. I crouched down to look. They matched our issue boots. Same tread, same shape. But the stride was weird. Too long, like the person had been walking stiff-legged or dragging 1 foot behind. I followed them maybe 30 yards off the path. The deeper I went, the quieter everything got. The kind of silence that makes your eardrums ring. Then I found the fire pit. It wasn't like a hiker's. No rocks, no structure. Just scorched earth and half-burnt wood. Around it were bones, small ones, maybe rabbit or raccoon, but they were arranged in a circle, neatly placed, like some weird art project. In the center, blackened by soot, was a ranger hat, identical to mine. I radioed it in. Dispatch asked if I wanted backup. I said yes. An hour later, I was still waiting. That's when I heard someone whistling. No clear tune, just 3 rising notes, soft and slow, like a lullaby you only half remember from childhood. I spun around, rifle half raised. The whistling stopped. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. Just as I started backing away, I saw something sticking out of the underbrush. A scrap of cloth. I tugged it free. It was part of a ranger's shirt, torn, faded, caked in dried mud and something darker. The patch said M. Gilroy. I didn't recognize the name, but the uniform was ours. All right, stitching, font, everything correct, except that shirt wasn't from the current uniform design. It was discontinued 4 years ago. I took it with me. Back at the station, I searched the employee records. No Gilroy, past or present. I even asked the older rangers during the next supply drop. Nobody had heard of him. One guy, Charlie, got real quiet when he saw the shirt. Said it looked too familiar. "Where'd you find that?" he asked. I told him. He just nodded once, then said, "Keep your doors locked at night, even the shed." That night, I deadbolted everything. I double-checked the shed padlock and put a chair under the doorknob of the cabin. Then I went to bed with the rifle across my chest. Around 3 a.m., something woke me up. Not a sound, a smell. It was faint but unmistakable, the acrid reek of burnt fabric and wet ash. I sat up slowly, my skin cold and tight. And there, at the edge of the window, was the silhouette of a man, wide-brimmed hat, shoulders too straight, unmoving. Watching me sleep. By the time I threw the door open, he was gone. But he'd left footprints on the inside of the window ledge. And the muddy ranger hat I'd taken from the fire pit? It was now sitting on my bed, dry, clean, and still warm. I didn't sleep for more than 10 minutes at a time. After that night, every creak of the floorboards felt deliberate. Every gust of wind scraping the side of the cabin sounded like someone dragging their fingers across wood, slow and patient. The next morning, I grabbed the hat, still resting exactly where I left it on the edge of the mattress, and shoved it into a plastic evidence bag. It still smelled like charred pine and sweat, even though it looked clean. I drove it down to the Forks Ranger Station. I didn't trust our outpost anymore. Told the supervisor, Rob Halgren, what had happened. Not everything. Not the footprints inside the window, not the frozen face I'd seen on the trail. Just the stuff I could back up. The old uniform, the fire pit, the unlogged person in full gear. He brushed it off as a local squatter, or maybe a disgruntled former employee. Said folks sometimes steal uniforms to get into restricted areas, spook tourists, or sell park gear on eBay. Told me to file a report with the Park Service and let the system work. But Rob didn't look me in the eyes while he said it. And as I was heading out the door, he muttered something. Soft, like he wasn't meant to say it aloud. "Should have stayed buried." I stopped. "What?" He just shook his head and waved me off like he was tired. "Nothing. Just watch your back." Okay, I took the long route back to my outpost that afternoon. Didn't want to be near the cabin before sunset. Figured I'd do a final sweep of the Southern Trail Loop, the one that curved toward the backcountry basin we call Devil's Throat. Locals avoid it. Old logging stories. Mostly missing workers, strange accidents, that kind of thing. About 2 miles in, I saw another set of footprints. Same tread, same long, awkward stride. They were recent, too, pressed into the mossy trail like the person had come through not more than an hour before me. But there was something else that chilled me. The prints doubled back on themselves. Whoever it was had walked in a wide circle multiple times, like they were pacing, or waiting. I followed them off the trail. About 100 yards in, the trees opened into a clearing I didn't recognize. Not on the map. Not on any terrain charts I'd ever seen. It was wrong. That's the best way I can say it. The space felt too quiet, too open, the way snow mutes sound after a storm, even though the air was dry. A boulder sat in the middle, black as obsidian. Fresh gouges clawed across it, like someone had taken a knife to the stone. And right there, leaning against the boulder, was another ranger shirt. This one was soaked in something. Not mud, Not entirely blood either. It was thicker, darker, like oil with a copper tint. And next to it, a name badge. Metal, polished. M. Gilroy. Again, exactly the same as the one I found earlier. Only this time the badge was brand new. No scratches, no rust, like it had been printed yesterday. I started backing up slowly, and then I heard it. That whistling again. Same 3 notes. Soft, slow, but closer this time. Too close. I turned and caught just a glimpse of something moving behind a tree. Just enough to see that damn uniform. That wide-brimmed hat. His back was to me again, just like before. Rigid, still, arms tight against his sides. Then he stepped sideways without turning and disappeared behind a tree he couldn't have fit behind. I froze. He hadn't walked. He hadn't even shifted. It was like someone dragging a cutout across a piece of paper. Smooth, soundless. The radio on my belt cracked to life. Unit 11, you there? We just got a distress ping off your GPS. You good? I fumbled for it. Dispatch, I need backup now. I'm near marker 42, just past Devil's Throat. I found clothing from an unconfirmed Ranger ID. Possible impersonator. Extremely dangerous. He's stalking the trails. Repeat, this guy is not one of us. There was silence. Then static. Then, return to the station, Unit 11. Do not pursue. Do not engage. Lock everything. Await instruction. The voice didn't sound like dispatch. Too flat. No call sign. No repeat back. Just that one cold message. And then I heard the click. Not from the radio, from behind me. I turned around. There was a camera nailed into the tree nearest to me. One of ours. Trail cam. Motion triggered, but it wasn't pointed at wildlife paths. It was angled down at me. The lens was still moving, still adjusting. Someone had just remotely accessed it. There weren't supposed to be any cameras this far out. I yanked the battery pack out and crushed the SD card under my boot. I didn't even think. Just reacted. Then I ran. Not jogged. Ran. All the way back to my outpost, lungs burning, legs cramping, ears straining for footsteps that never came. When I got back, I slammed the door shut and locked every bolt. That was when I saw it. The muddy Ranger hat. It was back on my bed. This time it was wet, dripping, and carved into the brim like with a blade were the words, "Gilroy lives here now." I didn't move for hours. I sat there on the edge of the cot with my back against the wall, rifle on my lap, and just watched the hat. Watched it drip, a slow, rhythmic plink, plink, plink onto the plywood floor. The water was dark, stained with something thick and red, like someone had steeped rust in a bucket for a week. I didn't dare touch it again. By sunrise, I was shaking. It was the kind of cold that gets into your bones. But I knew it wasn't the temperature. I was still soaked in sweat, shirt clinging to my back, teeth clenched so tight my jaw ached. I called in sick that morning, said I wasn't feeling right. Might have caught something. They said, fine, rest up. But no one offered to swing by. No one asked questions. That afternoon, I packed up a bag and drove down to Port Angeles to crash at a cheap roadside motel. Place was called the Whispering Cedars. One of those no-frills joints with flickering neon and curtains that don't quite close all the way. I needed noise, cars, civilization, something with walls that weren't made of pine. I didn't sleep much there either, because that night, someone slid something under my motel room door. I almost didn't notice it. I'd left the TV on, one of those late-night History Channel marathons where everything turns into an alien conspiracy. When I finally clicked it off, I saw the edge of an envelope sticking out on the carpet. No return address, no markings, just a single Polaroid inside, but not of me. It was a photo of the inside of my Ranger cabin, taken from my bedroom door. My rifle was on the bed. My boots were at the foot of it. You could see the logbook I'd left open on the desk. The timestamp on the bottom corner was from the previous night, meaning someone had been inside while I slept just feet away. My legs gave out. I hit the floor, hands shaking so hard I almost tore the picture in half. I wanted to drive straight to the police, but what was I going to say? That someone broke into a government cabin and left me a photograph in a motel 50 miles away? I checked out before sunrise and drove back to the park. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to prove to myself it wasn't real, that the photo was old, that it was some kind of sick prank. I didn't care. When I opened the cabin door, I almost vomited. Everything was exactly as it had looked in the photo. Rifle on the bed. Logbook open to the same page. But now there were footprints. Muddy, coming in through the door, looping around the room, stopping right beside where I should have been sleeping. I followed them with my eyes. They didn't leave the way they came in. They led to the closet. My hand hovered over the knob. I didn't want to open it. Every part of me screamed to burn the whole place down and run. But I opened it anyway. Empty, except for a second Ranger uniform hanging neatly on a wire hanger. No dust, no fold lines. It had been placed there recently. And on the shelf above it, there was something carved into the wood. Not a word this time. Just a symbol. 3 sharp lines pointing down like crooked teeth. And underneath it, the number, Sochstart 1973. I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it felt significant. Like a clue I couldn't read yet. I took a photo of it with my phone. First time I'd used the damn thing in days. That night, I made a decision. I needed answers. I remembered Charlie, the older ranger, the one who'd recognized Gilroy's name. He'd been around forever, long before most of us. Quiet guy, paranoid, but sharp. Lived up north near Sekiu in this little trailer with solar panels and no Wi-Fi. Total off-grid hermit. I drove up the next day. When I pulled into his gravel driveway, he was already standing outside, arms crossed. He looked like he hadn't slept. I was wondering how long it would take you to show up, he said, deadpan. I didn't say anything, just held up the picture of the carving, the 3 lines, the number. Charlie's face went pale. He didn't invite me inside. He just walked around back, grabbed a rusted metal tin from under a loose board on the porch, and handed it to me. Inside were old newspaper clippings, some yellowed, others water damaged, all about Olympic Park, and they all had one thing in common: Rangers missing, always alone. One headline read, "Local Ranger disappears without a trace." Last known location, Devil's Throat. Date, 1973. There was a photo, black and white, blurry. The man in the shot was standing in front of a fire pit. Same posture, same stiff stance, same wide-brimmed hat. Under the photo, in small type, Ranger Martin Gilroy. Charlie lit a cigarette with shaking fingers and said, he was never found. Search went on for weeks. No prints, no gear, just his name badge nailed to a tree. I asked him how he knew all this. He looked at me, dead serious. Because I saw him last month. Same place you did. He hasn't aged a day. He exhaled and said 5 words I'll never forget. Gilroy doesn't live alone anymore. Charlie wouldn't say more after that. I tried asking questions. What happened to Gilroy? What does the symbol mean? Who else knows? But he just stared off into the woods behind his trailer. Cigarette burned down to the filter, lips tight. It was like something in him had already decided I was too far gone to help. Before I left, he pressed an old laminated map into my hands. It was brittle at the corners, smelled like mildew and sweat, and had faded red markings drawn all across it. Circles, X's, dates. Some went back decades. Stay away from the places marked with the symbol, he muttered. If you see a second set of your own footprints, turn around. Don't follow the calls. Don't answer if it says your name. I asked what he meant by it. Charlie went back inside without a word. I drove off and pulled over a few miles down the road to study the map. Most of the marks were deep in the backcountry along trails that had since been shut down or renamed. But one of them, one of the red X's, was less than a mile from my station. Gravedigger's Hollow. I'd been there just once. No real trail, just a collapsed mine shaft from the turn of the century, tucked into a ridge of moss-covered stone, supposedly sealed after a rockfall. Nothing but stories and old warnings. But I couldn't stop thinking about the photo from 1973. Gilroy standing near the fire pit, just like I'd seen him. Just like he'd been standing when he watched me sleep. I waited until dusk before heading out. I didn't tell anyone. I packed the map, a flashlight, a sidearm, and a flare gun. Left a note taped to my bunk, just in case. If I'm not back by sunrise, don't look for me. Call state troopers and send them to Gravedigger's Hollow. The trail was overgrown, brush thick as a wall, trees hanging low like they were trying to hold me back. By the time I reached the ridge, it was almost full dark. My breath fogged in front of me. The air stank of mildew and something else, like burnt copper and wet fur. The mine shaft was still there, but it wasn't sealed anymore. The boards had been torn out, not rotted, ripped. Splinters splayed outward like claws had pried them loose. And in the dirt just outside the entrance, I found boot prints. 2 sets, one fresh, one older, but identical tread. Both were mine. I told myself it was a trick of the light, that maybe someone else wore the same boots, that maybe the ground had shifted. But then I heard it, that damn whistling. 3 notes, rising, slow. But this time it was inside the shaft. I raised the flashlight and stepped forward. Just inside the mouth, someone had painted on the wall in black ash and soot the symbol, the 3 crooked lines pointing down. Below it, scratched in with something sharp, were the words, "You were supposed to forget." My light flickered. Not the battery dying, this was something else, like the shadows were interfering with it. Then, just ahead, maybe 15 feet in, I saw him, Gilroy, standing in the tunnel, unmoving, hat low over his face. His ranger shirt was torn open, pale skin visible underneath like bark peeled off a tree. His arms were stiff, fingers bloated. But it was the smell that hit me hardest. Rot. Years old, the kind of smell that lives in your nose for days. I aimed my sidearm at him. "Don't move." He didn't. I stepped closer, my light shaking in my grip. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. I was almost within arm's reach when I realized he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me. I spun around. There was another ranger behind me. Same uniform, same stance. No face, just blank skin where the eyes and mouth should be, stretched taut like wet paper. Its chest heaved once, and the sound it made was not a breath. It was a laugh, low, broken, like air pushed through shredded lungs. I fired the sidearm twice. The thing didn't flinch. I turned and sprinted out of the shaft, crashing through branches, rocks tearing into my shins. I didn't stop until I saw the glow of my cabin lights in the distance, every muscle in my body screaming. When I finally collapsed inside, I slammed the door shut and dropped to the floor. That was 2 days ago. Since then, the radios haven't worked. The generator cuts out at night. My phone battery is dead and won't recharge. Even the solar pack won't hold a charge. And last night I woke up to breathing. Not mine. Slow. Wet. Clothes. Coming from under my bed. When I finally got the guts to look, nothing was there. But carved into the wooden slats beneath my mattress were 3 words, jagged and deep. "You're next, Ranger." I haven't left the cabin in over 30 hours. I don't know what time it is anymore. My watch stopped at 3:17 a.m. and hasn't ticked since. Every window is covered, every door locked, though I don't know why I bother. Whatever this is, locks don't seem to matter. The last time I looked outside, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was a hiker. Maybe help, finally. But then I saw the uniform. That same goddamn ranger outfit. It looked just like mine, except older, faded, as if time had worn through it, until only the idea of the uniform remained. He was standing at the tree line, motionless. Then another one appeared beside him. And another. 3 of them, all identical, all still. None of them moved. None of them came closer. They just watched. I tried the radio again. Static. I tried the flare gun, fired it into the sky like a last desperate scream. Nothing. That night, they got closer. I didn't hear them, didn't see them move. But when I woke up, muddy footprints circled the outside of the cabin. More than 3 now, dozens. Some small, some too large to be human. But all boot prints, all from Ranger-issue gear. The door had scratches on it, deep, uneven. Like someone had dragged a nail or a key across the wood over and over. Not trying to get in, just reminding me they could. There's a pattern to them. I can see it now. 3 long lines, down over and over again. Again and again. That symbol. I thought I was losing my mind until I checked the old employee ledger, the one we keep in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one nobody ever looks at. Names, dates, assignments. In 1973, 4 Rangers were listed for patrol in this section of Olympic. Martin Gilroy, Harlan Brooks, Samuel Dawes, and a 4th name that's been blacked out, literally scratched from the paper. But something's faint behind it. I rubbed it with a pencil, shaded the spot like you do with an old gravestone. The outline of my name. Mine. The year was wrong, though. It didn't say 2025. It said 1973. I don't know what this place is. A loop. A trap. Something left behind. Older than the park. Older than people. Maybe we were never meant to be here. Maybe that's why they put rangers out here in the first place. Not to protect the park from people, but to protect people from what's underneath it. I'm writing this on the backs of old trail maps, pages torn from the ranger manual. Anything I can leave behind because I hear them now. Inside. Not footsteps. Breathing. Low. Close. All around. They've finally come in. I saw the door creak open. Not forced, just invited. Like the cabin itself was tired of holding them back. The last thing I saw before the lights went out was my reflection in the window. But it wasn't me. It was Gilroy. Smiling. Wearing my badge. If you find this, don't come looking. Don't answer if they call your name. And whatever you do, don't put on the hat. The moment our tires crunched on the gravel driveway of that rental near Mount Rainier, I knew this trip was going to be something else. I've always had a knack for sensing when things are about to turn sideways. Maybe it's the Montana in me, or maybe it's just because I've read too many creepy novels. Either way, as I looked out at the dense Washington forest that surrounded us, I felt an itch at the back of my mind. My friends were a mix of excitement and exhaustion as we unloaded our bags. Alex, the planner of our group, had found this place. "Guys, this is going to be epic," he said with a grin that was too wide to be just about the scenery. Sarah, the skeptic, rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her curiosity. And then there was Mark, always ready for anything, camera in hand. We were greeted by Michelle, our rental host, who had the rugged, weathered look of someone who'd spent her life outdoors. She was across the street tending to a horse in a pasture that seemed to stretch into infinity. "Welcome," she called out, her voice carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place. Intrigue, maybe. We all walked over to greet her, eager to stretch our legs and get to know the place. Michelle had a way about her that was both disarming and slightly unnerving. She offered to show us around her property, and we eagerly agreed. The place was more than just a house. It was a slice of untouched wilderness, complete with more horses and a smattering of other animals. But it was when we crossed over to her backyard, past her quaint wooden house, that things started to get interesting. Michelle gathered us in a circle, her eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and excitement. "So, do you guys want to go back home with a story?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. How could we say no? We followed her past a barn, walking into a part of her backyard that was more forest than garden. The ground was soft underfoot, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. About 100 feet in, Michelle stopped. "Stop. Look down," she instructed. At our feet was a footprint, but not just any footprint. It was massive, easily twice the size of my own, and oddly shaped, wider and longer than any humans could be. And there were toe imprints, clear as day. "This," Michelle said, a serious tone replacing her earlier playfulness, "was made by a Sasquatch." A Sasquatch. The word hung in the air like a challenge. I glanced at my friends and saw their expressions mirror my own, a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Michelle went on to tell us how she found the imprint, and then, almost as an afterthought, how she had come to own this land and the property across the street where we were staying. Her voice took on a somber note. "You might think I'm crazy, but if I knew about their existence, I would have never moved here. Do you want to see more?" There was a collective pause, a moment where we all considered the sanity of following this path. But adventure has a way of tipping the scales. We nodded, and Michelle led us deeper into the woods. As we walked, the forest seemed to close in around us. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves were the only sounds that accompanied our footsteps. I felt a shiver run down my spine, the kind you get when you realize you're part of a story much bigger than yourself. And as the shadows lengthened around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. We ventured further into the dense Washington woods. I felt an uneasiness creep up my spine. I've been in plenty of wild places, but there was something about these woods, shrouded in twilight, that felt different. The trees loomed over us like silent giants, their branches casting long, strange shadows that danced in the breeze. Michelle led us with a confidence that only comes from someone who knows every inch of their land. She was part guide, part storyteller, weaving a narrative that was as captivating as it was unsettling. We were deep in her territory now, far from the comforts of the rental. "Here," Michelle said, stopping suddenly. She pointed at the ground to a cluster of sticks. They were arranged in a way that was too deliberate to be the work of nature. "I laid these out earlier today. Look how they've been moved." We circled around the sticks, the air thick with intrigue. The arrangement was peculiar, like a cryptic message left by an unknown hand. Michelle's theory was that the Sasquatch were mischievous creatures, fond of small pranks like this. It was hard to digest, but out here in the embrace of the wilderness, anything seemed possible. As we walked on, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The forest had a presence, a personality almost. It was as if the trees themselves were alive with secrets, whispering tales of the unknown. Michelle's next words sent a chill down my spine. "Right about here is where you might feel something unusual," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And she was right. The air around us felt charged, electric. The hair on my arms stood on end. And I wasn't the only one. Alex looked around nervously, and even Sarah, our group skeptic, seemed uneasy. "They asked me to bring you here," Michelle continued, her voice taking on a solemn tone. "The Sasquatch, I mean. They wanted to say hello." I tried to process her words. Were we really being summoned by a legendary creature, or was this all an elaborate ruse? But before I could ponder further, Michelle posed a question that cut through the silence like a knife. "Has any of you recently lost a brother, or experienced psychic abilities?" We exchanged glances, each of us shaking our heads. The question hung in the air, adding to the thickening plot of our little adventure. Our journey took us to the last point of our walk. Michelle's eyes widened as she examined another set of sticks. "I can't believe it," she murmured. Earlier, she had laid them out, and now they were rearranged, just like the first set. She spoke of how she often left gifts for the Sasquatch, food mostly, and how they always disappeared. I was skeptical, to say the least. I've spent enough time in the wild to know that plenty of creatures could be responsible for missing food. But there was something in Michelle's conviction that made me question my doubts. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, we heard it. A sound that defied description. It was distant but clear. A bizarre chorus of hoots and laughs unlike anything I've ever heard. Michelle's face lit up. "That's them," she said with certainty. "The Sasquatch." We stood there in the heart of the forest, listening to the haunting melody of the wild. It was a moment suspended in time, a crossroads between the known and the unknown. As we made our way back to the cabin, the forest seemed to whisper its secrets, leaving us with more questions than answers. Back at the rental, the night had wrapped itself around the cabin like a dark, enigmatic blanket. We sat on the porch, nursing our drinks, each lost in thought. The conversation swirled around our bizarre encounter, theories tossed back and forth like a game of catch. Alex was all in, buying every word Michelle had said. Sarah remained skeptical, her brows knitted in doubt. And Mark, well, he seemed more interested in capturing the perfect night shot of the woods than joining our debate. The thing about the wilderness is, it has a way of stripping down your beliefs, leaving you raw and open to possibilities you'd scoff at in the light of day. And right then, under the vast starry sky, I felt that vulnerability. "I'm going back out there," declared Alex suddenly, his voice cutting through the night. "I have to see this for myself." Mark, ever the adventurer, didn't hesitate to join him. I watched them disappear into the tree line, their flashlights bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps in the darkness. Left alone, I felt a strange sense of solitude. I wasn't up for chasing shadows in the woods. Instead, I rolled a joint and settled into the quiet, letting the serene beauty of the Washington wilderness wash over me. The cabin, with its warm lights and rustic charm, felt like a sanctuary. But the stillness of the night was deceptive. As I sat there, lost in the tranquility, it happened again. That sound. Distant but unmistakable. The eerie, almost otherworldly call that Michelle had attributed to the Sasquatch. It started as an owl's hoot, morphing into that bizarre, monkey-like laughter. I froze, every instinct screaming that this wasn't just some nocturnal animal. There was an intelligence in that sound, a deliberate communication that transcended the barriers of the known world. I wanted to dismiss it, to rationalize it as the trickery of the night. But sitting there alone in the vastness of the wilderness, I couldn't. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly, the sound echoing in my mind long after it had faded away. When Alex and Mark finally returned, I relayed my experience, but they hadn't heard anything. Their skepticism was evident, and I couldn't blame them. If I hadn't heard it with my own ears, I might have been skeptical too. The night wore on, and eventually we retreated to the warmth of the cabin. But sleep was elusive. I lay in bed, my mind racing with questions. What were those sounds? Was Michelle playing an elaborate prank, or was there something more to her stories? Driven by a restless curiosity, I grabbed my phone and did what any modern-day seeker of truth would do. I Googled, Washington State creepy laugh animal. The first result was an article titled, Bigfoot or Animals? Hair-raising sounds coming from a swamp on Indian reservation in Oregon. My heart skipped a beat. The description matched what I had heard perfectly. As I lay there staring into the darkness, I realized that the wilderness holds more mysteries than we can fathom. And sometimes the line between legend and reality is thinner than we dare to believe. Morning in the Washington wilderness is like waking up in a different world. The light filters through the trees in a soft golden haze, painting everything in a hue of tranquility. But that morning, as I sat on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee, the beauty of the surroundings was overshadowed by the lingering questions from the previous night. The article I had found about the Bigfoot sounds in Oregon was still open on my phone. I reread it, searching for some clue, some rational explanation. But the words just danced around the possibility of the unknown, offering no concrete answers. Alex and Mark were the first to join me, their steps heavy with the lack of any real discovery from their nocturnal expedition. Sarah followed, her skepticism now mixed with a tinge of curiosity. We sat there in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The conversation from last night resumed, but with a different tone. Now, there was a sense of wonder, a willingness to entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Michelle's stories than we had initially believed. It was time to leave the cabin, to say goodbye to the mystery that had enveloped us for the past couple of days. We packed our things, the mood subdued. The encounter with the unknown had touched each of us in different ways, leaving a mark that wouldn't easily fade. As we loaded the car, Michelle appeared. Her demeanor was the same as when we first met her, a mix of the earthly and the ethereal. "I hope you found what you were looking for," she said, her eyes twinkling with unspoken knowledge. We exchanged farewells, but her words stayed with me. Had we found what we were looking for, or had we stumbled upon a mystery that was never meant to be solved? The drive back was quiet, each mile taking us further away from the enigmatic woods and back to our reality. But the wilderness has a way of staying with you, its mystery seeping into your soul. In the days that followed, I found myself diving deeper into the lore of the Sasquatch, reading accounts, watching documentaries. The skeptic in me battled with the part that had heard those unexplainable sounds in the dark. The rational part of my brain argued for logic, but the primal part, the part that had sat alone on that porch, knew that some things defy explanation. I realized then that the wilderness is more than just trees and wildlife. It's a living, breathing entity filled with secrets and stories that go back centuries. And sometimes it chooses to reveal a glimpse of its mysteries, not to provide answers, but to remind us that there are things in this world beyond our understanding. As I sat at my desk, the city noises a stark contrast to the serene silence of the woods. I knew the experience would stay with me. The line between legend and reality might be blurred, But sometimes the mystery is more important than the truth. In the end, our Sasquatch experience in Washington state was a journey into the unknown, a reminder of the vast and unexplored mysteries that lie hidden in the heart of the wilderness. This trail has been closed since 1986. I found out why. I've been a park ranger for almost 5 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Drunken campers, lost hikers, black bears pawing through dumpsters, even the occasional cryptic scratch mark on tree trunks that someone swore was from a mountain lion, despite the fact that we haven't had those around here in decades. But last month, I found something that's been gnawing at my brain ever since. It was late October, just before the snow really starts coming down in the northern Rockies. I was pulling solo duty at Pine Haven National Park, a massive stretch of wilderness in Montana that doesn't get nearly as many visitors as places like Glacier or Yellowstone. It's quieter, less polished, and honestly, it's my favorite post. That night, I was supposed to patrol the Eastern Ridge trails, make sure no idiots were sneaking into camp without permits. We'd had issues before, college kids from Missoula thinking they're invincible, ignoring the warnings about early snow, or worse, the missing persons reports that still trickled in every couple of years. I was finishing up my thermos of gas station coffee, sitting in the cracked leather seat of the Ranger truck, when the radio crackled. Unit 4, you copy. I grabbed the mic. Yeah, this is 4. Hey, got a report of a light on the Elk Ridge Trail. Thought you should check it out before you clock out. Probably nothing. My stomach sank. Elk Ridge had been officially closed since 1986 after a rockslide wiped out a good chunk of the switchbacks. The park never reopened it. Too unstable, they said. But every now and then, you'd hear stories. Strange figures spotted near the trailhead, weird noises coming from that part of the park at night. Hikers who got turned around and ended up back there and didn't come out. Copy that, I said, trying to sound casual, though I felt my fingers tense up on the steering wheel. I headed east, bumping along the dirt road, pine trees crowding in on both sides. The further I drove, the more isolated it felt, the kind of isolation that makes your skin crawl. I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror every so often, half expecting to see headlights behind me, though I knew no one else should be out here. When I reached the Elk Ridge trailhead, I killed the engine and stepped out. The wind cut through my uniform, sharp and cold, and I pulled my jacket tighter. The place was choked with overgrowth, thorny brush curling over what was once a well-maintained path, wooden signs, long rotted and splintered, some sagging to the ground. And then I saw it, a flicker of orange light maybe 50 yards up the trail, just past a bend. I told myself it was probably a lost hiker with a lantern or a flashlight, maybe even some dumb teens trying to scare each other. I radioed back, told them I was going in to check it out. As I made my way up the trail, the crunch of gravel and dead leaves under my boots sounded impossibly loud. I kept glancing over my shoulder, swearing I heard faint shuffling behind me. But every time I turned, the woods stood still, dark and unmoving. The light stayed steady ahead, just out of reach, like it was leading me deeper in. I should have turned back. Instead, I kept moving. About 20 minutes up, the trail narrowed. I rounded a sharp curve where the trees thinned slightly, and that's when I saw him. A man standing by what looked like the collapsed remains of an old wooden bridge. He was facing away from me, motionless, wearing what looked like a ranger's uniform, or at least what used to be a ranger's uniform. The fabric was faded, sun-bleached, the sleeves shredded. His boots were caked with mud, one laced, the other flopping open like he'd forgotten how to tie it. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound firm, though my throat felt tight. "This trail's closed. You all right?" He didn't turn, didn't even flinch. The lantern at his feet burned with that strange, steady glow, not flickering like a regular flame, more like a dim, constant beam. I took a cautious step closer, hand instinctively moving to the radio clipped on my shoulder. "Sir, you need to come with me. This area's off limits." Still nothing. And then his head jerked like he'd been yanked by invisible strings, twisting slightly toward me. but not all the way. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the outline of a sunken cheek, a mouth half open. His jaw twitched once, then again, like he was trying to speak but couldn't form words. That's when I noticed the patch on his shoulder, Pine Haven Ranger Service. But the logo, it was the old design, the one they stopped using decades ago, and his name tag, barely hanging on by a thread, read Murray. I know that name. I've seen it in the break room on a faded, yellowed missing persons notice from 1986. Ranger Charles Murray disappeared during a routine patrol on Elk Ridge Trail. Never found. Presumed dead. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest, and then he turned fully. I can't describe his face. Not really. It wasn't rotted, not like a corpse, but it wasn't right either. His skin looked wrong, like wax left too close to a fire, sagging and warped. His eyes were wide, glassy, and his mouth hung open just enough to reveal cracked, dark teeth. He lifted one arm, pointing past me down the trail. His hand trembled violently, and when he finally spoke, his voice came out like a rasping whisper. Turn back. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't look back. Not until I was nearly to the truck, lungs burning, vision swimming. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, the trail was empty. The light was gone. The woods stood silent and dark as if nothing had ever been there. I drove back to the ranger station, shaking so hard I almost clipped a tree on the way down. I didn't report what I saw. I told them there was no one up there. No lights. Nothing. But the next night, when I was alone in the office, I went to the old records. I pulled Murray's file, and I found something I wish I hadn't. Scrawled on the last page, barely legible, was a note from the original search team. Do not reopen Elk Ridge. If anyone sees lights or hears the name Murray, tell them to leave. Do not let them follow. I don't know what's up there. I just know I'm never going back. That night, even after I got home, small, creaky apartment above the old bakery in town, I just sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on, jacket still zipped up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying it over and over, that sagging face, those trembling fingers pointing, that voice like dry leaves scraping across the ground. Turn back. God. By morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was exhaustion, long shift, thin mountain air, maybe even leftover adrenaline. I hadn't eaten much that day, hadn't drunk enough water. Rangers sometimes joked about trail madness, the way your mind plays tricks on you when you're alone too long in the woods. I wanted to believe that's all it was. But then the messages started. The first came through the park's central radio midday. Unit 4, check in. I pressed the mic. 4 here. We got another report, dispatch crackled back. Hikers said they saw a ranger up by the old Elk Ridge overlook. My stomach dropped. That can't be right, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. That trail's blocked. No one should be up there. That's what we told them, but they were pretty insistent. Said the guy was in uniform, waving them down. I almost dropped the mic. My fingers felt ice cold. I'll take a look. I didn't want to go. Every bone in my body screamed at me to turn off the radio, make up an excuse, do anything else. But I'd been a ranger long enough to know you can't ignore a call. So I went. The drive out was even worse this time. The air felt heavier, like the sky was pressing down on the forest. My ears kept popping the way they do when you're gaining elevation, except I wasn't. I was heading across a familiar flat stretch. It was like the pressure was wrong somehow, like the atmosphere was off just around that part of the park. I reached the overlook trailhead by late afternoon. It was quiet, way too quiet. Usually, you hear at least some bird chatter, maybe the distant knock of a woodpecker, squirrels rustling in the underbrush. Today, nothing, just dead air. I stepped onto the path, moving slow, boots crunching through frostbitten leaves. The trees here were old, towering lodgepole pines mixed with ancient Douglas fir, their bark blackened and scarred from wildfires decades past. The trail twisted ahead, pale and narrow, half swallowed by creeping vines and roots. About halfway up, I saw it. A boot print. Fresh. Not from a hiker. Too heavy. Too wide. More like a work boot. Ranger issue. My heartbeat spiked. I crouched down, fingers brushing the dirt. There was a faint drag mark too, like whoever made the print had stumbled or limped. I followed the trail carefully. every step feeling like I was walking into a trap. The light was fading fast. Twilight in the woods is a strange thing. Shadows thicken, and everything feels closer, tighter, like the trees are leaning in to listen. At the crest of the ridge, I spotted something through the branches. A figure. Not moving, just standing there. I raised my voice. "Hey, park ranger here? Are you all right?" The figure didn't react. I forced myself forward, closer. Now I could see he was facing away, just like before. Same uniform, old design, patch barely hanging on, same muddy boots. It was him. "Murray," I called out, throat dry. The figure twitched. My breath hitched. I took a shaky step back, instinct roaring in my chest. And then, in a voice like brittle paper, "You shouldn't be here." I wanted to run. God, I wanted to turn and run, but my legs locked up. My mouth opened, trying to form words, but nothing came out. He turned slightly, enough that I could see the ruined edge of his face, cracked skin, sunken eyes, the corners of his mouth torn upward in a grotesque slack smile. "Go back." And then, behind him, deeper in the trees, something moved. I don't know what it was. I couldn't see it clearly. Just a shape, tall, thin, gliding between the pines, barely making a sound. My brain scrambled, trying to make sense of it. Another person? An animal? But no, it was too tall, too smooth. Almost human, but not. I stumbled backward, heart hammering against my ribs. Murray's head snapped toward the movement, and for the first time I saw something flicker across his ruined face. Panic. He lifted one arm, pointing frantically at me. "Go." That broke the spell. I turned and ran. I don't remember the sprint back down the trail. I don't remember the drive. I just remember bursting into the ranger station, slamming the door behind me, chest heaving, lungs on fire. One of the other rangers, Sarah, looked up from her paperwork. "Jesus, you look like hell. What happened?" I tried to speak, but all I could manage was a broken, breathless whisper. "Something's up there." She frowned, confused. "On Elk Ridge? I thought you said it was just a dead trail." I shook my head. "No, there's something on that mountain." She opened her mouth, probably to tell me to calm down, but just then the radio crackled. "Unit 4, come in." It was dispatch. I snatched up the mic. "This is 4. A pause. Then, in a voice I swear to God sounded just like mine, distorted and slow. "Don't leave." I dropped the mic. Sarah's face went pale. We both just stared at each other. The static from the radio filled the room, the words echoing in the back of my skull. Don't leave. I didn't sleep that night either. And I knew, deep in my gut, this wasn't over. I didn't go into work the next day. I told them I was sick, called Sarah early, voice shaking, said I had chills, fever, whatever I could think of. She sounded surprised but didn't push. Honestly, I think she was relieved. Maybe she thought I needed a break after the weirdness yesterday. But the truth is, I didn't want to be anywhere near the park. I stayed holed up in my apartment, blinds drawn, sitting on the couch with the TV on, just for background noise. Netflix played some dumb cooking show on loop, but I wasn't watching. I just sat there staring at the wall, replaying everything over and over. Murray's face, that thing behind him moving through the trees, the voice on the radio. My voice, warped and slow, telling me, don't leave. By evening, I thought maybe I was cracking up. I even Googled stress-induced hallucinations, paranoia, auditory distortions, anything to explain what was happening. Maybe it was burnout, or maybe I just spent too much time alone in the woods. I was halfway convincing myself of that when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? At first, just static. Then a faint voice, barely audible over the hiss. Come back. I slammed the phone down so hard it bounced off the coffee table. I didn't sleep again. By 3 a.m., I was pacing the apartment, sweaty, jittery, jumping at every creak and car passing outside. I knew I couldn't stay like this. I needed answers. And there was only one place I was going to get them. By dawn, I was driving back toward Pine Haven. I kept telling myself I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I'd just swing by the ranger station, pull the old files, maybe talk to some of the senior guys. Hell, maybe I'd even tell Sarah what was going on. She'd seen how shaken I was. Maybe she'd believe me. But as soon as I pulled into the lot, I saw the station door hanging open. My stomach knotted. I killed the engine, stepped out carefully, listening. The place was quiet, except for the soft rattle of the wind through the flagpole. "Hello?" I called softly. "Sarah?" No answer. Inside, the lights were flickering. Papers were scattered across the floor. Chairs knocked over. Someone's coffee mug lay shattered on the ground. Dark liquid pooled beneath. I edged toward the back office, where we kept the records. My boots crunched softly over the mess. I reached for the handle and froze. On the door, scratched deep into the wood, were the words, "Stay away from the ridge." My breath hitched. I pushed inside. The office was a disaster zone. Filing cabinets yanked open, folders whipped apart. But one thing caught my eye. An old cardboard box shoved into the corner, half buried under loose files. I dragged it out. Inside were photographs, yellowed, curling at the edges. Black and white shots of the park from decades ago. Rangers standing proudly at trailheads. Groups posing near waterfalls. Smiling faces by the old ranger station that had burned down years ago. And then, near the bottom, I found something different. A photo of Murray. He looked younger, clean-shaven, smiling awkwardly at the camera, one hand resting on a tree trunk. But behind him, just barely visible, was a shadow. Not a trick of the light. Not a person. A shape. Tall, thin, smooth. Almost human. I felt a cold sweat break out down my back. My fingers trembled as I pulled out another photo. This one from a search party. Rangers standing in a line, flashlights pointed into the dark, faces tense. Again, in the distance, the shape, watching. I slammed the box shut. That's when I heard the bang. I spun, heart hammering. The front door of the station was swinging open, slamming hard against the wall in the wind. No, not the wind. A figure stood just outside. I barely saw it. Just a flash. Ranger uniform, faded, ragged, face pale and sunken. Murray. He stood there, half shrouded in shadow, one hand raised, trembling. I could barely hear it, but his lips moved. "Behind you." I turned, chest clenching, and saw for the briefest moment the reflection in the office window. Tall, thin, smooth, no face, no eyes. It was right behind me. I didn't think. I bolted, ran straight out the back door through the trees, stumbling over roots and brush, branches clawing at my arms and face. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran. By the time I reached my truck, my breath was coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I fumbled with the keys, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to crack my ribs open. When I finally peeled out of the lot, tires skidding over gravel, I dared a glance back at the station. Empty. No figure. No shadow. But just as I turned onto the main road, I saw something in the rearview mirror. For a split second, standing at the edge of the trees. Tall, thin, smooth. Watching. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's not done with me yet. I didn't go home. After I tore out of the Pine Haven lot, I just kept driving. Past the park boundary, past the small grocery store where the locals buy their bait and beer. Past the gas station that always smells like burnt coffee. I didn't even know where I was headed. I just needed to move. By the time I stopped, I was 2 hours south in a Walmart parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, chest tight like I'd been holding my breath the entire drive. I sat there as the sun dipped behind the mountains, watching families shuffle in and out of the store, listening to the faint, hollow hum of some teenager's bass-heavy music thumping from a nearby car. It should have felt normal. It should have been comforting. But it wasn't. Even here, surrounded by people, I felt it. Like something was standing just out of sight, just beyond the corners of my vision, watching, waiting. I pulled out my phone, scrolling aimlessly, looking for something to ground me. I even pulled up Murray's missing person file again, rereading the details, like maybe I'd missed something. Patrol gone wrong, radioed in his location, never returned, declared missing after 48 hours. Except they did find something. I dug back into the search reports I'd photographed earlier, flicking through the images until I found the small, crumpled note they'd logged. Do not let anyone follow. What the hell did that mean? Was Murray warning me? Or was he part of this? Now I sat there, the question swirling in my brain like dirty water down a drain, until my phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. Again. I froze for a long moment, just staring at the screen. The little green accept button seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Against every ounce of common sense, I answered. Hello? No static this time, just breathing. Slow, shallow, wet sounding. Then a whisper, low and cracked, like someone speaking through a broken mouth. "You're already marked." My stomach lurched. I hung up so fast I nearly dropped the phone. For a few minutes, I just sat there shaking, trying to slow my breathing. I wanted to call someone, a friend, another ranger, even the sheriff. But who the hell would believe me? "Hi! Yeah, I think a dead ranger and some faceless thing are following me." Yeah, that'd go over well. Instead, I forced myself to think. If whatever this was had attached itself to me, how did I break it? The only thing that made sense was going back. I didn't want to. God, I did not want to. But if I just kept running, how long before it found me anyway? I waited until full dark before I turned the truck around. The highway back to Pine Haven was a black ribbon winding through endless pine and spruce. Every now and then, headlights from an oncoming car would flash by, momentarily lighting the trees, making me jump every time I thought I saw movement at the edge of the road. By midnight, I was back at the park boundary. The gates were closed. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cold. The wind whispered through the trees, sending dry needles skittering across the pavement. Somewhere far off, a lone owl called. The rest was silence. I climbed the locked gate, boots slipping slightly on the icy metal, and dropped down on the other side. The park stretched out ahead, dark and still. My breath puffed out in clouds as I hiked toward the trailhead. And then, a light just ahead. Flickering orange. Lantern light. I crept forward slowly, heart pounding in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to stop. And there he was, Murray, standing at the mouth of the Elk Ridge Trail, same tattered uniform, same ruined face. He raised one hand, trembling, and for the first time I saw his eyes clearly. They were wide, terrified, not at me, but at something behind him. He mouthed one word, "Run." And then I heard it, a dragging sound like something impossibly tall sliding through the trees, not walking, not stepping, gliding. I stumbled back, but my boots slipped on the frost and I hit the ground hard, breath knocked from my lungs. From where I lay, I could just barely see past Murray, and in the shadows beyond, it was there. The shape, tall, thin, smooth, no face, no eyes, no mouth, but I felt it watching me. It raised one long, impossibly thin arm and pointed not at me, at Murray. Murray turned sharply, mouth opening in a silent scream, and in an instant he was gone, like smoke sucked into a vacuum. No sound, no flash. Just gone. I scrambled to my feet, sprinting back toward the gate, lungs burning, legs shaking. I could hear it behind me. Not footsteps, but a pressure. A pull, like the very air was bending, warping, chasing. I didn't stop until I hit the gate, nearly falling as I climbed over, tearing my jacket on the barbed top. When I landed on the other side, I didn't look back. I ran straight for the truck, slammed the door, and peeled out onto the highway, tires screeching. And for a long time, I just drove. I don't remember how long, maybe hours, maybe all night. But by the time I stopped, the sun was just starting to rise, pink and gold creeping over the mountains. I sat there shaking, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something move in the back seat. But when I turned, the seat was empty. I don't know what it wants. But I don't think I left it behind. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of stepping into my dark, narrow apartment, drawing the blinds, turning off the lights, it made my skin crawl. I kept picturing that empty space behind me in the rearview mirror, imagining the faintest shift of a shadow, the slightest creak of floorboards under weight that shouldn't be there. So I drove. All morning, all afternoon. I pulled through Starbucks twice, not because I was hungry, but because the chatter of the workers, the hiss of the espresso machine, the ambient noise, it made me feel normal for brief moments. I didn't tell anyone. Not Sarah, not my supervisor, not the sheriff. Hell, not even the guy at the drive-thru window who gave me a second cup by mistake and joked, "Long night, huh?" If I opened my mouth, it all comes spilling out. And I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. By early evening, I found myself parked outside a Walmart again, this time in a neighboring town. I watched shoppers push carts stacked with bottled water, toilet paper, snacks, garden mulch, just everyday, boring stuff. I craved that mundanity like oxygen. My phone buzzed. Blocked number. I squeezed it in my hand so hard I thought the screen would crack. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I didn't press it. It stopped ringing. And then a text. You can't run. No punctuation. No capital letters. I felt bile rise in my throat. I shut the phone off and tossed it onto the passenger seat, forcing myself to breathe. My hands were shaking again, a fine, uncontrollable tremor. I ran my palms over my face, willing myself to think, to do something. I didn't know what. Then, tap, tap, tap. I jolted. Someone was at the window. A man, mid-40s maybe, scruffy beard, wearing a green hiking jacket and cargo pants. He smiled awkwardly when I jumped, holding up both hands like, sorry. I cracked the window. Hey, sorry, man, he said, voice a little hoarse. Didn't mean to startle you. It's fine, I mumbled. Just, are you a ranger? His eyes flicked to the gear on my passenger seat, the Pine Haven jacket, the radio, the battered park map. Yeah, I said warily. His face shifted, lips tightening. You were at Pine Haven last night, weren't you? My stomach dropped. How do you know that? I was there too. He glanced around as if checking who was nearby. Saw the light up on Elk Ridge. Saw something else too. I stared at him, pulse hammering in my ears. He leaned in slightly. I don't know what you saw, man, but it's following me too. A rush of cold hit my spine. We sat there in silence for a second. I looked him over, trying to gauge if this was some weird joke or a desperate, grasping truth. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed dark with exhaustion. His hands gripping the window edge trembled faintly. What did you see? I asked quietly. His jaw worked. I don't even know. I was hiking up near the old trail, heard something moving, saw a lantern. I thought maybe someone was lost. But then, he stopped, swallowing hard. I ran, he finished. I've been running since. A thought hit me, sharp, electric, terrifying. If he was marked too, maybe we could figure this out together. Maybe we weren't completely alone in this. I killed the engine, unlocked the door, and stepped out. Let's talk, I said. He nodded, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Yeah, okay. My car is just over here. I followed him, heart pounding, every nerve on edge. We crossed the parking lot toward a dusty gray Subaru parked under one of the flickering overhead lights. He fumbled with his keys, hands shaking worse now, and I caught the faintest tremor in his voice as he said, I don't know how to stop this, man. I haven't slept in 2 days. I keep thinking. Click. He unlocked the door, and that's when I saw it through the back window in the reflection. It was standing behind us. Tall, thin, smooth. No face. My throat closed up, and before I could even yell, he turned just in time to see it. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The thing raised one arm, long and jointless, pointing, not at him, not at me, but at the car. For one awful moment, I saw his face twist in realization, sheer, unfiltered terror. And then, like smoke in the wind, he was gone. Just gone. His keys clattered to the ground. The only sound in the empty lot. I staggered back, chest heaving, heart in my throat. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but my legs locked. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting, and then it raised its hand again, this time pointing at me. My vision blurred, and a roaring sound filled my head like rushing water. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the ground, gasping, clawing at the pavement as if I could hold onto the world. And then, as suddenly as it started, it was gone. The lot was empty. The Subaru sat there unlocked, abandoned, and I was alone. Alone, but marked. I don't remember how I got back to the truck. I don't remember starting the engine or pulling onto the road or even driving the first 20 miles. I just remember the feeling, that hollow, ringing emptiness inside my chest, like something had been scooped out of me. Like my body was running on fumes, the shell of a person just barely holding together. By the time I realized where I was going, the sign was already in front of me. Pine Haven National Park, closed for winter season. The gates loomed up, chains tangled around the bars. I sat there in the cab, watching the trees sway in the wind, headlights carving faint shapes in the underbrush. I knew it was a trap. I knew going back was insane. But what was the alternative? Keep running until it took me? Sit in some motel room until I faded out like the man in the Walmart lot? I stepped out of the truck. The cold hit me like a slap, sharp and biting. but it barely registered. My fingers worked numbly at the gate, pulling at the chains until they gave just enough for me to slip through. And then I was walking back toward Elk Ridge, back toward the trail that had been closed since 1986. The woods were silent, except for the faint whisper of wind. My boots crunched over the frostbitten dirt, the air sharp in my lungs. Every step felt heavier, like something was pressing against me. Not just the cold, not just the fear, but something bigger, thicker. Like the very air was closing in. I reached the mouth of the trail, and there, waiting, was Murray. Same sunken eyes, same tattered uniform, same trembling hand raised in warning. But this time I didn't stop. I stepped closer. His mouth opened, jaw shaking, that voice scraping out like dry leaves. "You can't." I shook my head. "I don't have a choice." His hand dropped. His shoulders sagged like some invisible weight had crushed the last bit of fight out of him. And then slowly, he turned. He walked ahead, lantern flickering dimly in his hand, leading me up the trail. I followed. We climbed higher, past the broken switchbacks, past the dead trees and overgrown brush, until we reached the ridge. The wind howled here, sharp and endless, rattling through the burned-out trees. And waiting at the top it stood, tall, thin, smooth. No face, no mouth, no eyes, but I felt its gaze lock onto me. For a moment, Murray stood between us, lantern shaking, shoulders tense, and then the thing lifted one long, jointless arm and pointed, not at me, at him. Murray's body jerked, head snapping up, mouth opening in a silent scream as his form began to unravel, pieces fading like ash in the wind. I lunged forward instinctively, reaching out. No! But my hand passed straight through him, catching only cold, empty air. In a heartbeat, he was gone, just like the others. And then the thing turned its hand, pointing at me. I fell to my knees, chest heaving, heart slamming so hard I thought my ribs would crack open. I could feel it pulling at me, the same unraveling force, the same hollow emptiness creeping into my bones. But then a voice, low, faint, right by my ear. "Run." I don't know how. I don't know where the strength came from, but my legs moved. I ran. I ran like hell, stumbling, crashing through the underbrush, breath burning in my throat. Behind me, I could feel the air twisting, warping, the forest bending in impossible ways. Trees groaned and split. The ground seemed to ripple under my feet. But I ran, all the way back down the ridge, all the way through the forest, all the way to the truck. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. When I finally reached the truck, I slammed the door shut, fumbled the keys, and peeled out onto the main road, driving faster than I ever have in my life. The forest fell away behind me, dark and silent. I didn't stop. Not until I crossed the county line. Not until I saw the familiar glow of gas stations, fast food joints, Walmart, Costco, the real world bleeding back in, grounding me. But even now, even as I sit here in a crowded McDonald's parking lot, surrounded by people, music, lights, I can still feel it. Watching, waiting. I don't know why it hasn't finished the job. I don't know if it's done with me. But I know one thing. I'll never go back. Not to Pine Haven, not to Elk Ridge, not to that trail, because some places, they were never meant to be reopened.